The champagne glass shattered against marble, and in that split second, Eliza Rowan's world exploded into 1,000 glittering fragments. Laughter erupted, sharp, cruel, unmistakable. She stood frozen in the center of Lord Ashford's ballroom, wine spreading across her gown like blood, while 300 pairs of eyes turned toward her with the hunger of vultures. This wasn't just embarrassment, this was social annihilation. But then, cutting through the mockery like a blade through silk, came a voice that made the entire room go silent. "Miss Rowan, I believe you promised me this dance." The Duke of Viremont, the most feared man in London, was extending his hand to her, and everything was about to change. If you want to see how a woman who was nothing became everything, stick with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The ballroom smelled like expensive lies, rose water masking sweat, champagne covering desperation, and beneath it all the metallic tang of ambition. Eliza stood against the wall where the shadows pooled thickest, her hands folded so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She'd perfected this position over the years, chin slightly down, eyes somewhere middle distance, expression pleasant but forgettable. The wallpaper posture, the please don't notice me stance. It usually worked. "Oh, there's darling Mary Ann," Lady Pemberton's voice cut through the orchestra like a knife through butter. "Doesn't she look absolutely radiant?" Eliza didn't need to look. She knew exactly what she'd see, her younger sister floating through the crowd in a gown the color of sea foam, her golden curls catching the candlelight, her laugh musical and perfectly timed. Mary Ann had that gift, the one Eliza had been born without, the ability to make everything look effortless. "Such poise," someone murmured, "and that complexion, like porcelain." "The Rowan family is so fortunate." Eliza felt the words land like stones. The Rowan family, singular, as if Mary Ann was the only daughter worth mentioning. "Eliza, for heaven's sake, stop lurking like a ghost!" Her mother's voice appeared at her elbow, sharp with irritation. Catherine Rowan looked immaculate as always, her silver-threaded hair styled to perfection, her posture rigid with the kind of control that came from a lifetime of maintaining appearances. "You're 3 and 20, not some timid child. Mingle. Smile. Make yourself useful." "I am being useful," Eliza said quietly. "I'm staying out of the way." Her mother's eyes flickered with something that might have been pain if Catherine Rowan allowed herself such indulgences. Instead, it hardened into disappointment. "That is precisely the problem. Your sister is securing her future. You're collecting dust." Before Eliza could respond, before she could find the words that would somehow bridge the impossible distance between what her mother wanted and what she actually was, Catherine had already moved away, drawn like a magnet toward the cluster of admirers surrounding Mary Ann. Eliza exhaled slowly. The trick to surviving these events was simple: remain invisible until you could leave. She'd made it through dozens of balls using this strategy. She could make it through one more. "Miss Rowan?" A male voice, uncertain and slightly nasal. She turned to find Harold Wickham standing before her, his cravat tied too tight, his forehead already gleaming with perspiration despite the evening chill. Harold was the third son of a baron, which meant he had a title but no money, a pedigree but no prospects. They'd been introduced at 3 previous gatherings, and each time he'd asked her to dance with the enthusiasm of someone fulfilling an unpleasant obligation. "Mr. Wickham," she forced something resembling a smile, "would you care to— that is, if you're not otherwise engaged, perhaps we might—" He gestured vaguely toward the dance floor. It wasn't a question so much as a performance. They both knew he was only asking because his mother had probably nudged him, because asking the overlooked daughter was a safe way to appear gentlemanly without risking rejection from someone who mattered. "Thank you, but I'm quite content here." Relief flooded his face so obviously that Eliza almost laughed. "Ah, yes, of course. Well then, lovely evening, isn't it?" "Lovely," she agreed and watched him disappear into the crowd with almost comical speed. The orchestra swung into a waltz. Couples swirled past in a blur of silk and superficiality. Eliza recognized most of them: Lord Ashford and his new bride, the Kensington sisters, young Thomas Blackwood and his perpetually bored expression. This was her world. Familiar, unchanging, suffocating. She should have stayed exactly where she was, but her mother's words kept circling her mind like carrion birds. "Make yourself useful. Stop lurking like a ghost." as if being seen was as simple as deciding to be brave, as if a servant passed carrying a tray of champagne glasses, crystal catching candlelight, bubbles rising like tiny promises. Without thinking, Eliza reached out. Her hand connected with the tray at the exact moment someone bumped into the servant from behind. Everything happened in slow motion and all at once. The tray tilted, glasses slid. Eliza's fingers closed around empty air. And then champagne was cascading down her dress, cold and shocking, while the crystal exploded against the marble floor with a sound like a gunshot. The orchestra stumbled to a halt. Conversation died. 300 people turned to stare. Eliza stood frozen, champagne dripping from her chin, shards of glass glittering around her feet like evidence of a crime. Her dress, a modest gray silk that had already been unfashionable, now clung to her body, transparent in places, ruined beyond saving. For one perfect, horrible second, nobody moved. Then someone laughed. It was a small sound at first, quickly stifled, but it opened the floodgates. Laughter rippled through the ballroom, polite titters from the ladies, poorly disguised chuckles from the gentlemen, and somewhere in the back, actual guffaws. "Oh dear," she heard someone say, the words soaked in false sympathy. "Poor thing. How mortifying. Did you see her face?" Eliza's skin burned, her chest constricted. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to disappear, to somehow undo the last 30 seconds of her existence. But her feet wouldn't move. She was drowning in air, suffocating in front of everyone who had ever dismissed her, and now they finally had a reason. Her mother appeared at the edge of her vision, face frozen in aristocratic horror. Marianne's hand covered her mouth, eyes wide with secondhand embarrassment. The servants were moving toward her with towels, expressions carefully neutral, which somehow made it worse. Eliza wanted to die. Actually, physically cease to exist. "Miss Rowan." The voice cut through the chaos like a knife through silk, deep, controlled, and utterly unexpected. The laughter stopped. Eliza looked up through champagne-sticky eyelashes and found herself staring at Lucien Viremont, the Duke of Viremont, the man society called the Blade, because of how efficiently he cut through pretense and fools alike. He stood less than 3 feet away, tall and dark-suited, his face all sharp angles and calculated intensity. His eyes, gray like storm clouds, were fixed on her with an expression she couldn't read. Everyone was staring now, but for an entirely different reason. Lucien Viremont didn't attend balls. He certainly didn't speak to wallflowers. And he absolutely never, ever intervened in social disasters involving champagne and humiliation. Until now. "I believe you promised me this dance," he said, as if they'd had this conversation before, as if this was perfectly normal. Eliza's mind went blank. What?" "Our dance." He extended his hand, palm up, fingers steady. Not an invitation, a statement. "Shall we?" Behind him, Lady Pemberton looked like she might faint. Harold Wickham's mouth had fallen open, and Eliza's mother was staring at Lucien with the kind of desperate confusion usually reserved for miracles or madness. "Your Grace," Eliza managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think there's been a mistake. I never—" "Then we're correcting that oversight now." His hand remained extended, waiting. "Unless you'd prefer to continue providing entertainment for people who aren't worth your time." It wasn't said cruelly, it was worse than that. It was honest. Eliza looked at his hand, at the crowd, at the champagne-soaked disaster of her existence. She took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm, solid, real. He pulled her forward gently, leading her through the parting crowd toward the dance floor. Glass crunched under her shoes. Whispers exploded in their wake. But Eliza couldn't hear them anymore because her entire world had narrowed to the feeling of Lucien Viremont's hand in hers and the absolute impossibility of what was happening. They reached the center of the floor. The orchestra, after a moment of stunned confusion, started playing again. Lucien positioned them with efficient grace, his right hand at her waist, his left holding hers at the proper distance. He met her eyes, and for the first time she saw something that looked almost like amusement. "I'm covered in champagne," she said stupidly. "I know. People are staring. They're always staring. I don't understand why you're doing this." His expression shifted, something darker moving behind those gray eyes. "Because someone should. They began to move. Eliza had learned to waltz years ago. Her governess had insisted on the basics, but she'd never actually danced at a real ball. She'd certainly never danced with someone who moved like Lucien Viermont, whose confidence was so absolute it somehow transferred through his hands, making her body follow patterns she didn't know she remembered. "You're trembling," he observed, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I'm terrified." "Of me?" "Of everything." The honesty surprised her. "Of this, of tomorrow, of what everyone's going to say." "What they say doesn't matter." "Easy for you to claim." The words came out sharper than she'd intended. "You're the Duke of Viermont. You can do whatever you want. I'm nobody." His hand tightened slightly at her waist. "If you were nobody, I wouldn't be dancing with you." "Then what am I?" He studied her face with an intensity that made her want to look away, but she forced herself to hold his gaze. After a long moment, he said, "Someone interesting." Eliza almost laughed. "I'm the least interesting person in this room. Everyone else is performing. You're the only one who's actually here." He spun her smoothly, the world blurring around them. "Tell me something true, Miss Rowan." "What?" "Everyone in this ballroom has told me 1,000 lies tonight. Things they think I want to hear. Things designed to win favor or make impressions." They moved past Lady Pemberton, whose expression of shock had frozen into something like outrage. "I'm tired of it. Tell me something true." Eliza's mind raced. What could she possibly say that would matter to someone like him? But then she remembered standing against the wall, invisible and insignificant, and thought, "What do I have to lose? I hate these events," she said quietly. "Everyone pretends they're about society and culture, but they're just meat markets dressed up in silk, people measuring worth by titles and dowries, conversations that never go deeper than weather and gossip. It's all so meaningless, exhausting." She met his eyes. "And I'm very, very tired of pretending I'm not exhausted." Something changed in his expression, a crack in the armor, brief but real. "So am I." They finished the dance in silence, but it wasn't an uncomfortable one. When the music ended, Lucienne held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary, then stepped back and bowed with courtly precision. "Thank you for the dance, Miss Rowan. Thank you for—" She gestured helplessly at everything. Whatever this was exactly what it appeared to be. He glanced at the crowd watching them, and when he looked back, something sharp and dangerous had entered his smile. "And it's not finished." Before she could ask what he meant, he was gone, moving through the crowd with the kind of authority that made people instinctively move aside. Eliza stood alone on the dance floor, still dripping champagne, still the center of attention, but somehow, impossibly, the narrative had shifted. She wasn't the disaster anymore. She was the mystery. "Well," her mother materialized beside her, face an unreadable mask. "That was unexpected." "I have no idea what just happened," Eliza admitted. "The Duke of Viermont danced with you, in front of everyone, after you made yourself a spectacle." Catherine's voice was carefully controlled, but Eliza could hear the wheels turning behind her words. "There will be talk. There's always talk. Not about you." Her mother's eyes were sharp. "Never about you. Until now." Marianne appeared on her other side, looking genuinely confused for the first time Eliza could remember. "Did he say why?" "No." "Did he ask to call on you?" "No." "Then what did he say?" Eliza thought about Lucian's question, "Tell me something true," and his answer about her being interesting, about everyone else performing, about being tired. "He said he was bored of lies," Eliza said finally. Marianne frowned. "That's a strange thing to say." "Yes," Eliza agreed. It was. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of stares and whispers. People who had never spoken to Eliza suddenly remembered her name. Invitations were extended. Harold Wickham even attempted to approach again, though his mother physically redirected him toward safer prospects. But beneath all the sudden attention, Eliza felt something uncomfortable settling in her chest. Lucien Viermont had helped her. He'd turned her humiliation into something else, something that felt dangerously close to significance. But why? She knew enough about the Duke of Viermont to know he didn't do anything without reason. He was ruthless in business, strategic in politics, and famous for cutting off entire families who displeased him. The blade didn't show mercy. He certainly didn't rescue drowning wallflowers out of kindness. So what did he want? Sect. The answer came 3 days later, delivered by a footman in Veermont livery. Eliza was in the library, the one room in the Rowan house where she could usually find peace, when the servant appeared, silver tray extended. On it lay a single envelope, heavy cream paper with a ducal seal in dark wax. Her hands shook as she opened it. Miss Rowan, I find myself in need of intelligent conversation and have discovered such commodity to be remarkably rare. Would you do me the honor of joining me for a drive through Hyde Park tomorrow at 3 o'clock? I promise no champagne will be involved. Veermont Eliza read it 3 times. Then she read it again. What is it? Marianne appeared in the doorway, curious as always. Nothing, Eliza said automatically, then corrected herself. The Duke of Veermont has invited me to drive with him. Marianne's eyes went wide. What? Let me see. She snatched the letter, scanned it quickly, and let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a gasp. This is absurd. He must be… Eliza, you realize what this means? That he's eccentric? That he's interested? Marianne lowered her voice, even though they were alone. The Duke of Veermont doesn't invite women for drives. He doesn't court anyone. He barely tolerates society. And now he's asking to spend time with you, alone. It's Hyde Park at 3 o'clock. Half of London will be there. Exactly. Marianne sat down heavily in the reading chair. He wants to be seen with you after the ball, the champagne, the dance. He's making a statement. What statement? That you matter. The words hung in the air between them. Eliza had spent her entire life being told, in 1,000 subtle ways, that she didn't matter. Not compared to Marianne, not compared to anyone. And now the most powerful man in London was apparently trying to prove otherwise. It didn't make sense. I should decline, Eliza said, but even as she said it, she knew she wouldn't. Are you mad? Marianne stood up quickly. This is an opportunity. Do you understand how many women would kill for this? Mother will be thrilled. Mother will assume I've done something wrong. Mother will assume you've finally done something right. Marianne grabbed her hands, suddenly earnest. Eliza, please, just see where this goes. Maybe he really does find you interesting. Maybe this could become something real. Or maybe he's playing some game I don't understand, and I'm the piece he's decided to move. Then be a piece that moves herself. Eliza looked at her sister, beautiful, confident Marianne, who had never spent a day being invisible, who couldn't possibly understand what it felt like to suddenly be visible for all the wrong reasons. Except maybe they weren't the wrong reasons. Fine, Eliza heard herself say. I'll go. The next afternoon, Eliza stood in front of her wardrobe and stared at her options with growing panic. Everything she owned was designed for invisibility. Modest cuts, muted colors, nothing that would draw attention. Perfect for a wallflower, disastrous for a drive with a duke. Not the brown, Marianne said from the doorway. And definitely not the gray. You're not attending a funeral. I look terrible in everything. You look invisible in everything. There's a difference. Marianne pushed past her, rifling through dresses with the efficiency of a general planning battle strategy. This, the blue. She pulled out a day dress Eliza had forgotten she owned. Soft periwinkle with cream trim, simple but well cut. Not fashionable enough to be pretentious. Not plain enough to be forgettable. I haven't worn that in years. Because it makes you look like a person instead of furniture. Marianne thrust it toward her. Put it on. 20 minutes later, Eliza stood before the mirror and barely recognized herself. The dress fit well, better than she remembered. Marianne had styled her dark hair in a simple but elegant knot, with a few loose curls framing her face. She looked present, like someone who might have opinions worth hearing. You're beautiful, Marianne said softly, and for once there was no performance in her voice, just honesty. I'm terrified. Good. Fear means you're alive. A knock sounded from downstairs. The footman's voice drifted up. Miss Rowan, the Duke of Veermont has arrived. Eliza's stomach dropped. I can't do this. Yes, you can. Marianne squeezed her hand. And you will. Because for once, Eliza, someone sees you. Don't hide from that. Lucien Veermont stood beside an elegant black carriage, looking exactly as dangerous as his reputation suggested. He wore a dark coat cut to perfection, his posture relaxed, but somehow still commanding attention. When he saw Eliza descending the steps, something that might have been approval flickered across his face. "Miss Rowan?" He offered his hand to help her into the carriage. "You look well." "I look nervous," she corrected, then immediately regretted her honesty. But he smiled, a real smile, not the calculated expression she'd seen him use in society. "Good. I'd be concerned if you weren't." They settled into the carriage, and the driver urged the horses forward. Hyde Park at 3 o'clock was exactly as crowded as predicted, carriages, riders, and pedestrians all participating in the afternoon ritual of seeing and being seen, and everyone was staring at them. "Ignore them," Lucian said quietly. "How? They're everywhere. Practice. I've spent 34 years not caring what people think. It becomes easier." Eliza glanced at him. "You've never cared? Not even once?" "I cared once." His expression went distant. "When I was young and stupid enough to believe their opinions mattered. Then I learned what people actually value: power, money, access. Never truth. Never substance. So I stopped playing their games and started making my own rules." "That must be lonely." "Yes." He met her eyes. "But loneliness is preferable to performing a role that suffocates you." They rode in silence for a moment, the wheels crunching on gravel, the distant sound of other conversations floating past. Then Lucian said, "Tell me about your family." "What about them?" "You have a sister, the beautiful one everyone adores." "Marianne," Eliza confirmed, trying to keep her voice neutral. "Yes, she's perfect. Perfect is boring. Perfect gets proposals. Perfect gets boredom disguised as marriage." He shifted slightly to face her. "What about you? What do you want?" The question caught her off guard. Nobody had ever asked her that before. Not directly. Not like they actually cared about the answer. "I want—" She stopped, searching for honesty. "I want to matter, not because of who I marry, or how I look, or which family I belong to. I want to matter because of who I am, what I think, what I contribute." She felt heat rise in her cheeks. That probably sounds ridiculous. It sounds sane. Lucien's gaze was intense. "Everything else is the ridiculous part." "Your Grace—" "Lucienne," he interrupted. "If we're going to have honest conversations, we should use honest names." "That's not proper." "I don't care about proper. Neither, I suspect, do you." He was right, and that scared her. Because admitting she didn't care about proper meant admitting she'd spent years pretending to be someone she wasn't, following rules she didn't believe in, trying to fit into a world that would never accept her. "Why did you dance with me?" The question burst out before she could stop it. "At the ball. After the champagne. You could have let me disappear. Why didn't you?" Lucien was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Because I saw myself in you." "What?" That moment. Standing there, humiliated, wanting to disappear. His jaw tightened. "I've been there. Different circumstances, but the same feeling, and I remember how it felt when nobody helped, when everyone just watched." He turned to look at her. "I didn't want you to feel that way." Eliza's throat tightened. "I don't understand you." "Good. If you did, this would be boring." They continued their circuit of the park, conversation flowing easier than it had any right to. Lucien asked about her education, her interests, her opinions on everything from literature to politics. And the remarkable thing was, he actually listened. He didn't interrupt or correct or dismiss. He engaged with her ideas as if they had value. It was intoxicating. It was terrifying. It felt like the most dangerous thing she'd ever done. When the carriage finally returned to her family's home, the sun had begun its descent toward the horizon, painting everything gold. "Thank you," Eliza said as Lucien helped her down. "For the drive, and the conversation, and the catastrophic disruption of your previously invisible existence?" She laughed despite herself. "Yes, that." "It's not finished," he said, echoing his words from the ball. "This disruption. I hope you're prepared." "I'm not." "Even better." He bowed formally, but his eyes held that same intensity. "Until next time, Miss Rowan." He was gone before she could respond, the carriage pulling away smoothly, leaving her standing on the steps feeling like her entire life had just tilted sideways. Marianne threw open the door before Eliza could even knock. "Tell me everything, now, immediately." But before Eliza could answer, her mother appeared behind Marianne, face flushed with excitement and calculation. "Eliza, drawing room, now." The drawing room was her mother's domain, carefully decorated, meticulously maintained, designed to impress visitors and intimidate daughters. Catherine sat in her high-backed chair like a queen holding court. "Well?" she demanded. "What happened?" "We drove through Hyde Park. We talked." "About what?" "Books, politics, ideas." Her mother's expression flickered with something that might have been disappointment. "He didn't make advances, didn't indicate his intentions. His intentions seemed to be conversation." "Conversation doesn't lead to marriage proposals, Eliza." "Maybe I don't want a marriage proposal." The room went silent. Even Marianne looked shocked. Catherine leaned forward, voice dropping to something sharp and cold. "You don't want— Eliza, do you understand what's happening here? The Duke of Viramont, one of the most powerful men in England, is paying attention to you. This is an opportunity that will never come again. If you squander this because you're too proud or too foolish to— He's not interested in marrying me, Mother." Eliza kept her voice steady. "He's interested in talking to me, that's all, for now. But talking leads to courtship. Courtship leads to proposals, and proposals lead to security, to status, to everything this family needs." "Everything Marianne didn't provide?" Catherine's face went cold. "Your sister has options. You have one. And if you're too stubborn to recognize that, maybe I'd rather have conversation than convenience." The words were out before Eliza could stop them. "Maybe I'd rather be chosen for who I am than married for what I represent." "Then you're a fool." Her mother stood, silk rustling with the kind of anger that came from years of control finally meeting resistance. "You're 3 and 20, Eliza, unmarried, overlooked. This is your chance, possibly your only chance, and you're treating it like some philosophical exercise. Or maybe I'm treating it like my life." They stared at each other, years of unspoken disappointment crystallizing into this single moment. Finally, Catherine said, "Do what you want. But don't come crying to me when he loses interest and you're left with nothing." She swept from the room, leaving Eliza standing alone with Marianne. "She's terrified," Marianne said quietly. "Of what?" "That you'll succeed where she failed, that you'll actually be happy." Marianne walked over, took her hands. "She married for security, Eliza. Duty. All the right reasons according to society, and she's been miserable for 30 years. She can't stand the thought of you finding something real." "What if Mother's right? What if Lucien loses interest? What if this is all just— Then at least you'll have had something true, even if it doesn't last." Marianne smiled sadly. "That's more than most people get." The letter arrived the next morning. "Miss Rowan, I'm hosting a small dinner party next week. 8 people. Actual conversation instead of performance. You're invited. Please say yes, because if I have to endure another evening of meaningless small talk, I may do something drastic. L." Eliza traced the words with her finger, heart hammering. A dinner party. At his home. Meeting his friends. This was no longer a curiosity or a passing interest. This was intent. She should have been thrilled. She should have been planning what to wear, what to say, how to impress. Instead, all she felt was a growing dread. Because Lucien Viramont was dangerous. Not in the obvious ways society whispered about, his power, his money, his influence. He was dangerous because he made her want things she'd convinced herself didn't exist. Honesty. Partnership. Being seen. And wanting those things meant risking everything she'd built to protect herself. The walls, the invisibility, the safety of not mattering. If she said yes to this dinner, she was saying yes to being seen, which meant she could also be destroyed. Eliza sat at her writing desk for an hour, pen hovering over paper, trying to find the courage to write 2 simple letters. Yes. Finally, she did. And the moment she sealed the envelope, she knew there was no going back. Whatever happened next, whether this was real or performance, salvation or disaster, she'd chosen to step out of the shadows. Now she'd have to learn how to survive in the light. The dress was wrong. Eliza knew it the moment she put it on. Too simple for a duke's dinner party, too formal for something he'd called small and intimate. She'd changed 3 times already, her bedroom floor littered with rejected options like casualties of war. Just wear the green, Marianne said from the doorway, exasperated. You look fine. Fine isn't good enough. Fine is honest, which is what he seems to want from you. Marianne walked in, started picking up the discarded dresses. Stop trying to be someone you're not. That's what everyone else does. Eliza stared at her reflection. The green dress was simple, darker than fashionable, cut modestly, nothing that would turn heads. But it fit well, and more importantly, it felt like hers. Not a costume, not armor. What if I'm not enough? The question came out small. Then he's an idiot. Marianne met her eyes in the mirror. But I don't think he is. The carriage Lucien sent arrived precisely at 7. Eliza's hand shook as she climbed inside, her mother's parting words still ringing in her ears. Don't embarrass us. As if that was possible. As if she'd been anything but an embarrassment her entire life. The Viremont townhouse sat in Mayfair, imposing and elegant in equal measure. Gas lamps flickered along the street, casting everything in amber uncertainty. A footman opened the carriage door before it had fully stopped, his face professionally blank as he helped her down. Miss Rowan, His Grace is expecting you. The entrance hall was darker than she'd anticipated. Rich wood paneling, portraits of ancestors who looked perpetually disapproving, a massive staircase that curved upward like a question mark. Not welcoming exactly, but honest. No pretense of warmth it didn't feel. Eliza. She turned to find Lucien descending the stairs, dressed more casually than she'd ever seen him. No cravat, jacket unbuttoned, looking almost human, almost approachable. Your Grace? Lucien, he corrected, reaching the bottom step. We agreed, remember? That was in a carriage. This is your home. Which makes formality even more pointless. He gestured toward a doorway on the left, where voices and laughter drifted out. Come, meet the people who tolerate me. The drawing room was smaller than she'd expected, furnished with comfortable chairs instead of the stiff, formal pieces most aristocrats preferred. 6 people were already there, 3 men, 3 women, all turning to look as Lucien led her inside. Everyone, this is Miss Eliza Rowan. Eliza, this is everyone. A tall woman with striking red hair laughed. Charming introduction, Lucien, very detailed. She stood, extending her hand directly to Eliza instead of waiting for a proper introduction. I'm Catherine Blackwood, Kate. And before you ask, yes, I'm related to the boring Blackwoods, but I try not to hold it against myself. Eliza shook her hand, startled by the directness. Nice to meet you. This is my husband, James. Kate indicated a man with gentle eyes and an ink stain on his fingers. He writes seditious pamphlets and pretends they're philosophy. They are philosophy, James protested mildly. They're trouble, said another man, standing near the fireplace. He was younger than Lucien, with an easy smile and expensive but carelessly worn clothes. I'm Simon Harcourt. I make bad investments and worse jokes. That's my sister, Amelia. A woman who looked like a sharper, feminine version of Simon waved from her chair. I fix Simon's investments and tolerate his jokes. It's exhausting. And I'm Marcus Webb, said the final man, older than the others, with silver at his temples and shrewd eyes. I have the dubious distinction of being Lucien's solicitor, which means I spend most of my time telling him things he doesn't want to hear. And I ignore him, Lucien added. It's a very functional relationship. Eliza felt dizzy. These people were nothing like the social gatherings she'd attended. No hierarchy, no careful positioning, no performance. They talked over each other, interrupted without offense, laughed too loud. Sit, Kate commanded, gesturing to an empty chair. Tell us something interesting about yourself. What? Interesting fact. Unusual hobby. Scandalous opinion. Anything that isn't weather or fashion. Eliza's mind went blank. Then, before she could stop herself, I think most of society is performing an elaborate play, and we're all pretending not to notice it's fiction. Silence. Then Simon started laughing. Oh, I like her. Lucien, you can keep this one. I wasn't asking permission, Lucien said dryly, but his eyes met Eliza's with something warm. She's not wrong, Marcus said, settling into his chair. Society is theater, just theater with real consequences. Which makes it worse, Amelia added. At least in actual theater, everyone knows they're pretending. The conversation took off from there. Politics, literature, the absurdity of social conventions, arguments that would have been scandalous in any proper drawing room. Eliza found herself relaxing, contributing, even laughing. These people didn't expect her to be perfect. They expected her to be present. Dinner was served at 8, an intimate table instead of the formal arrangement she'd anticipated. Lucien seated her at his right, Kate on his left, and the conversation continued without pause. "So, how did you meet?" Kate asked, directing the question at Eliza with unsettling directness. "I spilled champagne on myself at a ball, and Lucien felt sorry for me." "That's not what happened," Lucien said. "Then what did happen?" He was quiet for a moment, considering his wine glass. "You looked like you were drowning. I threw you a rope. You decided to grab it." "Romantic," Simon said sarcastically. "Honest," James countered, "which is rarer." "Tell me, Miss Rowan," Marcus said, his lawyer's eyes assessing. "What do you think of the Marriage Reform Act they're debating in Parliament?" It was a test. Eliza recognized it immediately. The kind of question designed to reveal whether she actually had opinions or just borrowed them from men. "I think it's insufficient," she said carefully. "Allowing women to control property in their own name is progress, but it doesn't address the fundamental problem. Marriage law still treats women as commodities transferred from father to husband. Property reform is meaningless if women still can't refuse a marriage forced by family pressure." Marcus's eyebrows rose. "You've read the actual proposal." "I read everything I can find. Most of it's boring legal language wrapped around the same core issue. Men making laws about women without asking women what they actually need." "Dangerous thoughts," Amelia said, smiling. "Only if I say them publicly." "You're saying them now." "This is different. This is—" Eliza gestured at the table. "Whatever this is." "Safe," Kate supplied. "This is safe. We all say dangerous things here. Lucien collects us like other people collect art." "I collect interesting people," Lucien corrected. "There's a difference." "And what makes someone interesting?" Eliza asked, his gray eyes fixed on hers. "Honesty, intelligence, the courage to be themselves even when society punishes them for it." The words hung there, heavy with meaning that went beyond the conversation. James cleared his throat. "Speaking of courage, did you hear about Lady Pemberton's spectacular failure at the charity auction?" The moment broke, conversation shifting to gossip and stories. But Eliza felt Lucien's attention return to her repeatedly throughout the meal, not possessive exactly, more like he was checking to make sure she was still there, still comfortable. After dinner, they moved back to the drawing room. Kate pulled Eliza aside while the men argued about politics. "You're different than I expected," Kate said, handing her a glass of port. "What did you expect?" "Someone desperate, someone performing." Kate studied her face. "But you're not, are you? You're actually just yourself. Is that good or bad?" "Depends. Are you prepared for what comes next?" "What comes next?" Kate glanced toward Lucien, who was deep in conversation with Marcus. "He's interested in you, really interested. And when Lucien Viremont decides he wants something, he doesn't stop until he gets it. I'm not a thing to get." "Good. Then you might actually survive him." Kate's expression softened. "I like you, Eliza, which means I'm going to give you advice you didn't ask for. Don't try to be what you think he wants. He spent his entire life around people who do that. It's why he's alone. He has all of you. We're friends. That's different than partner, than equal." She lowered her voice. "His father is a monster. His mother died trying to please him. Lucien learned early that performance is poison. If you perform for him, even with the best intentions, he'll see it, and it'll destroy whatever this is before it begins." Eliza's chest tightened. "So what do I do?" "Be terrified. Be uncertain. Be yourself." Kate smiled. "Just don't be false." They rejoined the others. The evening wound down slowly, people leaving in pairs, final conversations by the door, promises to meet again soon. Finally, only Eliza remained. "I'll have the carriage brought around," Lucien said. "Wait." The word came out before she'd thought it through. "Can I ask you something first?" "Anything." "Why me?" She forced herself to meet his eyes. "You could have anyone, someone beautiful, someone accomplished, someone who makes sense. Why are you interested in me?" Lucien was quiet for a long moment. Then he walked to the fireplace, staring into the dying flames. "Do you know what it's like to be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone?" Yes, she whispered. Everyone wants something from me. Access, influence, money, title. They perform whatever role they think will get them closer to what they want. He turned back to face her. You're the first person in years who looked at me and saw a person instead of a prize to win. You don't know what I see. You told me you were tired of pretending, that you hated these events, that you wanted to matter for who you are, not what you represent. His voice dropped. Those weren't calculated words, they were desperate ones. I recognize them because I've thought them myself 1,000 times. Eliza felt something crack open in her chest. So this is what? Mutual recognition of misery? This is two people who are tired of being alone, choosing not to be. He stepped closer. If you want to leave, I'll understand. This path, being visible, being with me, it's not going to be easy. People will talk. They'll question. They'll try to destroy what we're building. We're not building anything yet. Aren't we? The question hung between them, weighted with possibility and danger in equal measure. I should go, Eliza said, but she didn't move. Yes, Lucian agreed, and he didn't move either. They stood there in the dying firelight, the space between them full of everything they weren't saying. Finally, Lucian extended his hand, not demanding, just offering. Walk me to the door? She asked. His fingers closed around hers. They moved through the quiet house together, footsteps echoing on marble. At the entrance, the footman was already waiting with her coat. Thank you, Eliza said, for tonight, for including me. Thank you for coming, for being honest with people who needed to hear it. He helped her into the coat, his hands lingering on her shoulders for just a moment. Can I see you again? When? Tomorrow, the next day, whenever you'll allow. Lucienne, I know this is fast, I know it's intense, but I'm tired of pretending otherwise. His gray eyes were fierce. I want to spend time with you. Not because it's proper. Not because society expects it. Because when I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to be genuine. What if I disappoint you? Impossible. You don't know me. Then let me. His voice was low, urgent. Let me know you. All of you. The parts you hide. The parts that scare you. The parts you think aren't good enough. Eliza's throat tightened. That's a lot of parts. I have time. She should have said no, should have protected herself, should have run from this man who saw too much, asked too much, wanted too much. Instead, she said, tomorrow, 3 o'clock, Hyde Park again. His smile was like sunrise. I'll be there. The carriage ride home felt surreal. Eliza kept replaying the evening, the conversation, the laughter, the moment by the fireplace when Lucian had looked at her like she was something precious and rare. It was intoxicating. It was also probably a mistake. The house was dark when she arrived, everyone asleep except Marianne, who was waiting in Eliza's room. How was it? Strange, wonderful, terrifying. That sounds promising. Marianne patted the bed. Tell me everything. Eliza did. She described the people, the conversation, Kate's warning, Lucien's question about building something together. Marianne listened without interruption, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern. You're falling for him, Marianne said when Eliza finished. I barely know him. That's not a denial. It's too fast, too intense, too… Real? Marianne grabbed her hands. Eliza, for once in your life, you're letting yourself want something. Don't talk yourself out of it. What if it ends badly? What if it doesn't? But Eliza couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Not with Lucienne, with the situation itself. Things like this didn't happen to women like her, the overlooked sister, the wallflower, the nobody. She fell asleep with that thought circling her mind like a vulture. The answer came 3 days later. Eliza and Lucian had fallen into a pattern, daily drives, conversations that stretched hours, moments where the space between them felt electric with possibility. She'd started to relax, to believe this might actually be real. Then the letters started. The first arrived on a Tuesday, delivered with the regular post. Plain envelope, no return address, her name written in precise script. Miss Rowan, you may think you've found favor with the Duke, but you should know you're not the first. He collects broken things. Once he's fixed you, he'll move on. A friend. Eliza's hands shook as she read it. Then she crumpled the paper and threw it into the fire. The second came the next day. The Duke's interest is a game. Don't mistake his attention for affection. He's using you to scandalize society. When he's bored, you'll be discarded. The third arrived Thursday morning. Ask him about Lady Helena Crawford. Ask him what happened when she believed he loved her. That one, Eliza kept. She brought it with her to their drive that afternoon, the paper folded in her reticule like evidence of a crime. Lucienne noticed her distraction immediately. What's wrong? Nothing. Eliza. She pulled out the letter, handed it to him without speaking, watched his face as he read, saw something dark flash across his expression. How many have you received? 3. Do you want to see the others? I want to know who's sending them. His voice was cold, controlled, the dangerous version of Lucian she'd heard about but never seen. And I want to tell you the truth. About Lady Helena Crawford? About everything. He signaled the driver to stop, then turned to face her fully. Helena and I were engaged 5 years ago. Arrangement made by our fathers, strategic alliance, political benefit, all the usual reasons. We tried to make it work. We couldn't. What happened? She wanted the title, the position, the life being a duchess would provide. His jaw tightened. She didn't want me, and when I realized that, when I understood she'd spend our entire marriage performing a role, I ended it. She must have been devastated. She was angry, not heartbroken, angry that I'd disrupted her plans. He met Eliza's eyes. I'm not proud of how I handled it. I was young and arrogant and convinced I was right. But I don't regret the decision. Marrying her would have destroyed us both. And now someone wants me to think you'll do the same to me. Someone wants you to doubt what's happening between us, to question my intentions, to leave before... He stopped. Before what? Before you become too important to lose. The words hung there, raw and honest and terrifying. Lucienne, I know this is fast, I know we barely know each other, but I also know I've never felt this way about anyone. His hand found hers. You make me want things I've convinced myself didn't exist. Partnership, honesty, someone who sees past the title to the person beneath. What if I'm not strong enough for this? What if you are? They sat in silence, the carriage motionless, London moving around them like they were the still center of a turning world. Finally, Eliza said, I want to believe you. I want to believe this is real, but someone is trying very hard to convince me otherwise. Then we find out who. His expression hardened, and we make them stop. The campaign against her escalated quickly after that. More letters arrived, detailed accounts of Lucian's supposed infidelities, warnings about his temper, suggestions that he was mentally unstable. Then the social attacks began. At Lady Morrison's afternoon tea, Eliza arrived to find every seat taken, women turning away with barely disguised hostility. At the theater, former acquaintances suddenly didn't recognize her. Invitations that had poured in after Lucien's attention now dried up completely. They're freezing you out, Marianne said, furious, making you choose between Lucien and everything else. There is no everything else. There's never been anything else for me. Then what are you going to do? Eliza didn't answer, because the truth was she had no idea. The situation exploded at Lord Ashford's masked ball, the same venue where this had all begun. Eliza had debated attending, but Lucien insisted. We don't let them win by hiding. She wore a silver gown Marianne had helped select, a delicate mask that covered half her face. For the first hour, things seemed almost normal. Then Lucien was pulled away by Marcus for some urgent business matter, leaving Eliza alone near the refreshment table. Poor thing, a voice said behind her, pitched just loud enough to carry. She actually believes he cares. Eliza turned to find 3 women standing close, their masks not quite hiding their identities. Lady Pemberton, Mrs. Hartwell, and Helena Crawford herself. Beautiful, poised, everything Eliza wasn't. It's sad, really, Helena continued, addressing her companions but clearly speaking for Eliza's benefit. How he collects broken creatures, fixes them up, gives them hope, then discards them when something shinier comes along. I heard he's already bored, Mrs. Hartwell added. My husband says Lucien was at the club last week, barely mentioned her. Well, what did we expect? She's so ordinary. Eliza's hands clenched. She should walk away, should ignore them, should remember Kate's advice about not caring what people thought. Instead, she stepped forward. Lady Crawford, I'm sorry your engagement to the Duke didn't work out. Helena's eyes narrowed behind her mask. Excuse me? Your engagement, the one that ended 5 years ago. That must have been difficult. I don't see how that's... It must be especially difficult to watch him move on, to choose someone else, to be happy with someone who isn't you. Eliza kept her voice level, almost sympathetic. I imagine that's why you're working so hard to destroy what we're building. Because if you couldn't have him, no one should. Silence radiated outward like ripples from a stone. How dare you? Helena breathed. How dare I what? Speak honestly? Call out manipulation? Eliza felt something shift inside her. All the years of being quiet, being invisible, being dismissed, crystallizing into something sharp and dangerous. You're sending me letters. You're spreading rumors. You're trying to turn society against me because you can't stand that Lucian chose truth over performance. That's not... The handwriting matches your invitation to Lady Morrison's tea. The paper is from the same stationer you've used for years. And the information in those letters? Only someone close to Lucian would know those details. Eliza stepped closer, watching Helena's face pale. So, yes, Lady Crawford, I dare. You can't prove anything. I don't need to prove it to society. I only need Lucian to know. Eliza felt her heart hammering but kept her voice steady. And I wonder what he'll do when he finds out you're actively sabotaging his happiness. I wonder how society will react when they learn you're the bitter ex-fiancé who can't let go. Helena's mask of composure cracked completely. He'll leave you, eventually. You're not sophisticated enough, not beautiful enough, not... Enough! Lucian's voice cut through the confrontation like a blade. He appeared at Eliza's side, his expression carved from ice. Helena, leave. Now. Lucien, I was just... You were attacking the woman I love in a public space. You've been sending threatening letters. You've been orchestrating a campaign of social destruction. His voice was quiet, which somehow made it more terrifying. I gave you the courtesy of discretion when our engagement ended. I didn't expose your infidelities or your gambling debts or your father's financial crimes. But if you continue this campaign against Eliza, I will burn your entire family's reputation to the ground. Helena's face went white. You wouldn't. Try me. She fled. The watching crowd parted like water, whispers erupting in her wake. Lucien turned to Eliza, his expression softening. Are you all right? I just confronted a society lady in public and accused her of stalking me. Eliza felt slightly hysterical. I think I'm going to vomit. Not here. Bad form. He took her hand, leading her toward a side door. Come on. They ended up in a small garden, cool air washing over Eliza's overheated face. She sat on a stone bench, trying to process what had just happened. Did you mean it? She asked. Which part? The part about loving me. Lucien went very still. Then he knelt in front of her, taking both her hands in his. Yes. We've known each other 3 weeks. I know. That's not enough time to... I've spent my entire life around people who perform. You're the first person who doesn't. His voice was fierce. You stood up to Helena. You didn't cry or retreat or collapse. You confronted her with evidence and logic. You were magnificent. I was terrified. So was I. He reached up, brushing a curl away from her face. When I saw her attacking you, I wanted to destroy her, but you didn't need me to. You fought your own battle. Do you understand how rare that is? Eliza's eyes burned. What if I can't do this? What if I'm not strong enough for what comes next? You just proved you are. His hands tightened on hers. But you need to know this won't be the last attack. My father is worse than Helena. More dangerous. More ruthless. If we continue this, if we move forward, he'll come after you with everything he has. Why? Because I'm his heir, his legacy, and he can't control me. Lucien's jaw tightened. He'll try to break what we have, to prove I'm unfit, to force me back into line. Then we stop. We end this before... No. The word was absolute. I've spent 34 years letting fear dictate my choices, letting his shadow determine my life. I won't let him take this too. He met her eyes. But I need you to know what you're choosing. If you stay with me, you're declaring war on one of the most powerful men in England. Eliza looked at him. This complicated, damaged, honest man who'd seen her when no one else had, who'd given her truth when everyone else offered performance, who'd made her believe she could be more than the invisible sister. "Tell me about your father," she said quietly. And in that garden, while society continued its elaborate dance inside, Lucien told her everything. His father, the elder Duke, was a man who viewed people as assets to leverage or obstacles to remove. He'd driven Lucien's mother to an early grave through constant criticism and impossible demands. He'd arranged Lucien's engagement to Helena not for happiness, but for political alliance. And when Lucien had ended it, when he had dared to choose his own path, his father had launched a quiet campaign to have him declared mentally unfit. "It's still ongoing," Lucien said. "The legal challenge. He's gathering evidence, building a case, trying to prove I'm unstable, that I need a guardian to manage my affairs." "That's insane. That's power." His voice was bitter. "He can't control me through force, so he's trying to control me through law. And if he succeeds, everything I have, my title, my fortune, my freedom, becomes his to manage. How do we stop him?" "We don't. I do." He stood, pulling her up with him. "But first I need to know you're with me. Actually, with me. Because this gets worse before it gets better." Eliza thought about Helena's attack, about the letters, about the isolation and hostility that would only intensify. She thought about her mother's warnings and society's judgment and every sensible reason to walk away. Then she thought about standing in Lucien's drawing room, surrounded by people who were honestly themselves, about conversations that mattered, about being seen. "I'm with you," she said, "even if it means losing everything else." "I never had anything else to lose." Lucien's eyes darkened with something fierce and grateful. He pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "I love you," he said again, quieter this time. "I know it's fast and probably foolish, but it's true." "I love you too," Eliza whispered, and felt the words reshape everything. They stood there in the moonlight, while inside the ballroom, society continued its performance. But out here, in the real world, two people who'd been alone had chosen each other. And war was coming. The summons came at breakfast. Eliza was spreading marmalade on toast, trying to ignore her mother's pointed silence when the footman entered carrying a silver tray. On it lay a single envelope, thick parchment sealed with the Viramont crest. Not Lucien's personal seal, but the official ducal one. Her stomach dropped. "What is it?" Marianne asked, but Eliza was already tearing it open. "The Duke of Viramont, Sr., requests the presence of Miss Eliza Rowan at Viramont House tomorrow at 2:00 to discuss matters of familial concern." The words were formal, bloodless, and absolutely terrifying. "Let me see that." Her mother snatched the letter, read it twice, and went pale. "The elder Duke. He wants to meet you." "Why?" "Why do you think?" Catherine's hands trembled slightly. "His son is courting you publicly. Of course he wants to assess the damage." "I'm not damage. To him, you're a disruption." Her mother set down the letter like it might bite. "Eliza, listen to me carefully. This man destroyed his own wife. He's bankrupted families for minor slights. If you go to this meeting unprepared, then I'll prepare." Eliza's voice came out steadier than she felt. "What do I need to know?" Catherine stared at her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she sat down. "The elder Duke values 3 things: power, legacy, and control. He'll try to buy you off first, offer money to disappear. When that fails, he'll threaten. And if you still don't break, he'll destroy you systematically." "How do you know this?" "Because I've watched him do it for 30 years. Her mother's expression was distant. "Your father and we were supposed to have more. Ambition, connections. But we made the mistake of crossing the elder Duke in a business matter once. He crushed us so thoroughly we never recovered." Eliza had never heard this story. "What happened?" "We lost everything that mattered. Money, standing, hope." Catherine met her eyes. "And that was over a failed investment. You're threatening his heir, his bloodline, his control over the one thing he still owns. He won't just destroy you, Eliza. He'll erase you." "Then why are you telling me this? Why not just tell me to run?" Her mother was quiet for a long moment. "Because you won't. You're too much like I was, stubborn, idealistic, convinced love conquers all." She stood, smoothing her skirts with shaking hands. But at least go in with your eyes open. Eliza sent a note to Lucian immediately. His response came within the hour, delivered by Marcus Webb himself. He wants to see you alone, Marcus said without preamble, standing in their drawing room like a bearer of bad news. Lucien is furious, but there's nothing we can do. If you refuse the meeting, the elder duke will use it as evidence that you're manipulating his son. If you go, I walk into a trap. Yes. Marcus pulled out a chair, sat without invitation. Miss Rowan, I need to be honest with you. The elder duke has been building a case against Lucien for months. Medical testimonies, financial irregularities, witnesses claiming erratic behavior. He's trying to have Lucien declared incompetent and his assets placed under guardianship. That's insane. Lucien is the sanest person I know. Sanity is subjective when you have enough money and power. Marcus's expression was grim. The hearing is scheduled for next week. Everything depends on what the magistrate decides, and your relationship with Lucien is being used as evidence of his instability. How? According to the case, a rational man of Lucien's position would never court someone so far beneath him without some underlying psychological dysfunction. Marcus said it clinically, but Eliza heard the insult beneath the words. You're being framed as proof of his deteriorating judgment. So I'm the problem. You're the excuse? There's a difference. He leaned forward. The elder duke doesn't actually care about you. He cares about control. If he can prove Lucien is making irrational decisions, like choosing love over strategic alliance, then he can justify taking over. What happens if he wins? Lucien loses everything, his autonomy, his fortune, his freedom to make his own choices. He becomes a figurehead while his father runs everything. Marcus's voice hardened. Including who he marries. Eliza felt sick. And the meeting tomorrow? Is your audition. He wants to see if you're smart enough to be dangerous or stupid enough to be dismissed. Marcus stood. Either way, be careful. This man doesn't make idle threats. That night, Eliza couldn't sleep. She kept imagining the elder duke, some monster in expensive clothes ready to devour her. Finally, at midnight, she gave up and went to the library. Marianne found her there an hour later, surrounded by books about contract law and property rights. What are you doing? Research. Eliza didn't look up. If I'm going to war, I need weapons. You're not going to war. You're going to tea with a terrible man. Same thing. Eliza finally met her sister's eyes. He's using me to attack Lucien, using our relationship as proof of instability. If I can prove I'm not some irrational choice, if I can demonstrate intelligence, strategy, capability, maybe I can undermine his case. Or maybe you'll make yourself a bigger target. I'm already a target. Eliza went back to her books. At least this way I'm fighting back. Marianne sat down across from her, quiet for a long moment. Then, I'm proud of you. Eliza looked up, startled. What? You, this. Marianne gestured at the books, the determination, everything. I've spent my whole life being told I'm the special one, the beautiful one, the one who matters. And I believed it. Her voice cracked slightly. But you're the brave one. You always have been. Marianne, I mean it. I've never fought for anything real. I've just existed, letting people admire me, playing the role I was born into. She reached across the table, squeezed Eliza's hand. You're fighting for something that matters. Don't let anyone, not father, not society, not that terrible old duke, convince you otherwise. Eliza's throat tightened. I'm terrified. Good. It means you're not stupid, Marianne smiled. Now tell me what you're planning. They stayed up until dawn, strategizing. By the time the sun rose, Eliza had a plan. It wasn't perfect. It probably wasn't even good. But it was something. Viremont House sat in the most prestigious part of London, a massive Georgian structure that radiated old money and older power. Eliza climbed the steps at exactly 2 o'clock, her hand steady through sheer force of will. A butler answered, ancient, expressionless, probably older than the house itself. Miss Rowan, His Grace is expecting you. She followed him through corridors lined with portraits of disapproving ancestors, each one seeming to judge her for daring to exist in their presence. Finally, they reached a study. Dark wood, leather furniture, and sitting behind an enormous desk, the elder Duke of Viremont. He looked like Lucien in the worst possible way. Same gray eyes, same sharp features, but twisted by cruelty and decades of unchallenged power. He didn't stand when she entered, didn't offer a seat, just studied her with the expression of someone examining an insect. "Miss Rowan?" His voice was cold, precise. "Sit." It wasn't an invitation. Eliza sat. "I'll be direct," he said. "You're a disruption. My son has forgotten his responsibilities, his position, and his breeding. You've encouraged this lapse in judgment, and now you'll correct it." "Correct it how?" "By leaving, immediately, permanently." He opened a drawer, pulled out a bank draft, and slid it across the desk. £50,000. Enough to secure your family's future. Enough to buy your disappearance. Eliza looked at the number. It was more money than her family would see in a lifetime. Enough to save them from the financial disaster her mother had hinted at. Enough to secure Marianne's future, to provide for her parents' old age. Enough to erase her. "No," she said quietly. The elder Duke's expression didn't change. "No? I won't take your money. I won't leave Lucien. And I won't pretend this is about anything except your need for control." "Control?" He leaned back, something dangerous entering his smile. "You think this is about control?" "I think you're terrified your son has found something you can't manipulate. Someone who sees him as a person instead of an asset." "Careful, Miss Rowan." "Why?" "You've already decided to destroy me. Being polite won't change that." Eliza felt something shift inside her. All the years of being quiet, being invisible, crystallizing into steel. "You're building a case against Lucien, using our relationship as evidence of instability, but that only works if you can prove I'm an irrational choice. So let's talk about rationality. This should be amusing. I've read the Marriage Reform Act, all versions, the proposed amendments, the opposition arguments, the legal precedents." She watched his eyes narrow slightly. "I understand property law, contract negotiations, and the loopholes wealthy families use to control their children. I'm not some ignorant girl who stumbled into your son's life. You're the overlooked daughter of a minor family with no prospects and no value. I'm also the woman Lucien loves, which means I'm the only thing standing between you and total control over his life." Eliza leaned forward. "So here's my offer. Drop the competency hearing, acknowledge our relationship, and I'll make sure Lucien maintains the family legacy. Fight me, and I'll spend every day proving that your son is brilliant, capable, and completely sane, which makes you the monster trying to imprison him." Silence. Heavy and dangerous. Then the elder Duke laughed. It was a terrible sound. "You think you can threaten me? I think I can expose you. I have documentation of every bribe you've paid, every witness you've coerced, every false medical report you've commissioned." She was bluffing, but she kept her voice steady. "Marcus Webb is thorough, and he's loyal to Lucien, not you." The laughter stopped. Marcus has spent years watching you abuse your power. Did you really think he'd stay silent forever?" Eliza stood. "The hearing is next week. You can proceed with your case and risk everything being made public, or you can walk away. Your choice." "You're making a grave mistake." "I'm making the only choice I can." She walked toward the door, then turned back. "I love your son, and I won't let you destroy him to satisfy your ego." She left before he could respond, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She made it to the street around the corner, into a narrow alley before her legs gave out. She'd just threatened one of the most powerful men in England, with evidence she didn't have, on behalf of a man she'd known for less than a month. She was either incredibly brave or catastrophically stupid. A carriage appeared at the alley's entrance. The door opened, and Lucien jumped out, reaching her in 3 strides. "What happened? What did he say?" "I threatened him." The words came out shaky. "I told him I had evidence of his crimes. I told him to drop the case or I'd expose him." Lucien went very still. "Do you actually have evidence?" "No." "Then you just declared war on a man who destroys people for sport." He pulled her up, held her steady. "With nothing but courage and lies." "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have—" "You were magnificent." His hands framed her face. "Terrifying and foolish and magnificent. But now we have to make good on your threat." "How?" "By finding the evidence we don't have." He pulled her toward the carriage. "Come on. We have 6 days before the hearing." The next week was chaos. Lucien, Marcus, and Eliza spent 14-hour days digging through records, interviewing servants, tracking down witnesses. They discovered the elder Duke had been bribing doctors for false diagnoses, paying off former associates to testify against Lucien, even forging financial documents to suggest mismanagement. But finding evidence and proving it were different things. "We need something concrete, Preka," Marcus said on day 4, frustrated. "Something undeniable. Right now we have testimony from servants and discrepancies in dates. That's not enough to stop the hearing." "What about the financial records?" Eliza asked. "You said he forged documents." "We think he forged them. We can't prove it without the originals." "Where are the originals?" "Viramont House, under lock and key in his personal study." Eliza and Lucien looked at each other. "No," Marcus said immediately. "Absolutely not. Breaking into his house isn't breaking in if I still have a key," Lucien interrupted. "Technically, it's still my family home. Technically, it's a felony. Only if we get caught." Lucien turned to Eliza. "Can you pick a lock?" "What? No, why would I?" "Kate can," he said, already moving toward the door. "And she owes me a favor." 2 nights later, Eliza found herself dressed in dark clothes, standing outside Viramont House at 2 in the morning, watching Kate Blackwood pick the lock on the study's side entrance with terrifying efficiency. "How do you know how to do this?" Eliza whispered. "Misspent youth." Kate grinned. "Also, my father was terrible with money. Sometimes we needed documents he wouldn't give us." The lock clicked. They slipped inside. The study was darker than Eliza remembered, all shadows and lurking furniture. Lucien moved confidently toward the desk, Kate keeping watch by the door. Eliza's job was simple: be lookout near the window. "How long will this take?" she asked. "Depends on what we find." Lucien was already rifling through drawers, his movements quick and precise. "Or don't find." Minutes passed. 5. 10. Eliza's nerves stretched tighter with each second. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps. Every distant noise was discovery. "Found something," Lucien said quietly. He held up a ledger, flipped it open. "This is it. Payments to Dr. Richardson for false diagnoses. Payments to witnesses. Everything." "Can we prove it's his handwriting?" "With a comparison sample, yes." Lucien tucked the ledger inside his coat. "Let's go." They were halfway to the door when light flooded the hallway outside. "Someone's coming," Kate hissed. They froze. Footsteps approached, slow, deliberate. The door handle began to turn. Lucien grabbed Eliza, pulled her into the alcove behind a massive bookshelf. Kate disappeared into the shadows on the other side. The door opened. The elder Duke walked in, carrying a candle, wearing a dressing gown. He moved to his desk, sat down heavily, and for a long moment just stared at nothing. Eliza pressed against Lucien, barely breathing. If they were discovered now with the stolen ledger in his private study, they'd have no defense. "I know you're here, boy." Eliza's heart stopped, but Lucien's hand on her waist tightened, signaling her to stay quiet. The elder Duke poured himself a drink. "You've always been predictable, righteous, stupid about things that matter." He took a long swallow. "Your mother was the same way. Thought love meant something. Thought integrity had value." Lucien's breathing changed, something dangerous entering his stillness. "I broke her of that delusion. It took years, but eventually she understood. Power is all that matters. Control is all that lasts." He set down his glass. "You'll learn the same lesson. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not at the hearing, but eventually you'll realize that you're a monster." Lucien stepped out of the shadows. The elder Duke didn't look surprised. "That I'm a realist. You destroyed my mother. You're trying to destroy me. And you call that realism?" "I call it preservation. This family, this legacy. It's bigger than your feelings or your pathetic rebellion." He stood facing his son. "The hearing will proceed. You'll be declared incompetent, and everything you think you've built, including that girl you're hiding, will be mine to manage. You have no idea what I've built. I know you've stolen from my desk. I know you're clutching that ledger like it's salvation." The elder Duke's smile was cruel. "Did you really think I'd keep real evidence where you could find it?" Lucien's face went white. "That ledger is useless. Payments to legitimate consultants, all properly documented. Nothing illegal. Nothing incriminating. He walked closer. But breaking into my home, stealing private documents, that's actual crime. That's real evidence of instability. You planned this, Lucian said slowly. You knew I'd come. I'm always 3 moves ahead, boy. You should have learned that by now. Eliza felt everything collapsing. The plan, the evidence, the hope. Then she noticed something. The desk drawer the elder Duke had opened. It was the wrong one. He'd said Lucian took the ledger from his desk, but Lucian had been searching the right side. That drawer was still closed. She stepped out of the shadows. Miss Rowan! The elder Duke's eyes glittered. How lovely! Breaking and entering with my son. Your parents must be so proud. You're lying, Eliza said. Excuse me? About the ledger. You said it's useless, but you haven't even looked at it. She walked closer, heart hammering. If it was really legitimate documents, you'd know exactly what it contained. But you're guessing, which means Lucian found something you didn't expect. The elder Duke's expression flickered, just for a second, but it was enough. The real evidence is still here, isn't it? Eliza moved toward the desk. You didn't think we'd actually look. You assumed we'd be too scared, too intimidated. Don't touch that desk. Why? What are you hiding? She reached for the closed drawer. The elder Duke lunged forward. Lucian intercepted him, and suddenly they were grappling. Father and son, years of hatred and control crystallizing into physical violence. Eliza yanked open the drawer. Inside was another ledger, this one marked with dates and amounts that made her stomach turn. Payments to forged documents, bribes to magistrates, plans to have Lucian committed to an asylum. Kate! She shouted. Kate appeared, grabbed the ledger, and ran for the door. Eliza followed, glancing back to see Lucian shove his father away and sprint after them. They burst into the hallway, ran through the darkened house, the elder Duke's furious shouts echoing behind them. Down the stairs, through the entrance hall, out into the cold night air. A carriage was waiting, Marcus at the reins, looking terrified. Go, Lucian shouted, practically throwing Eliza inside. Now! They careened through the streets, the sound of pursuit fading behind them. Inside the carriage, Eliza clutched the ledger, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold it. Did we just... She started. Steal evidence from the most powerful man in London while he watched? Yes. Lucian was breathing hard, a cut above his eye bleeding slightly. Marcus, tell me this was worth it. Marcus grabbed the ledger, flipped through it by lamplight. His expression shifted from fear to shock to something like triumph. This is everything. Forged documents, bribed officials, plans for false commitment. If we present this at the hearing, we destroy him, Lucian finished. We also admit to theft, Kate pointed out. Worth it, Lucian said. He turned to Eliza. You saw the drawer, how? He was too confident, too sure we'd failed. She met his eyes. People who are actually winning don't need to gloat. They just win. You're terrifying, he said, but he was smiling. Good. She touched the cut above his eye gently. Are you all right? Better than all right. He caught her hand, held it. We have 3 days until the hearing. 3 days to turn this evidence into a case. 3 days for your father to retaliate, Marcus added grimly. Let him try. Lucian's expression hardened. I'm done running from him. Done letting him dictate my life. They reached Marcus's home, neutral ground, safer than anywhere else. Inside, they spread the ledger's contents across the dining table, cataloging every crime, every manipulation, every lie. This is damning, Marcus said, making notes. But we need to be careful how we present it. If we accuse too directly, it becomes our word against his. What if it wasn't just our word? Eliza asked. What if we had other witnesses, people he'd hurt? Like who? Like every family he's destroyed, every person he's crushed, every victim who's been too afraid to speak. She looked up. He told me about my parents, about how he ruined them over a business dispute. How many others are there? Marcus's eyes widened. Dozens, maybe more. But getting them to testify is impossible if they think he'll win. But if they see someone standing up to him, if they see he can be beaten. Eliza stood. We have 3 days. Let's find them. What followed was a blur of frantic activity. They split up. Marcus handling the legal strategy, Kate tracking down witnesses, Lucian securing the evidence. And Eliza. She became the face of the resistance. She visited every family the elder Duke had destroyed. She listened to their stories, businesses stolen, reputations ruined, lives shattered. And she told them about the hearing, about the evidence, about the chance to finally fight back. Most said no. Too scared, too broken, too convinced that power always won. But some said yes. By the morning of the hearing, they had 12 witnesses willing to testify, 12 families ready to stand up and say, enough. The courtroom was packed. Society had come to watch the spectacle of a son challenging his father's power. Eliza sat in the gallery, Mary Ann beside her, watching as Lucien and Marcus took their positions at the defendant's table. Across the aisle, the elder Duke sat with his lawyers, looking confident, untouchable. The magistrate entered, an older man, stern-faced, known for being incorruptible. We're here to determine the competency of Lucien Viremont, Duke of Viremont Jr. The petitioner may present his case. The elder Duke's lawyer stood. He was smooth, practiced, presenting a narrative of erratic behavior and poor judgment. He called doctors who testified to Lucien's supposed instability, former associates who claimed financial mismanagement, and finally, he addressed Lucien's relationship with Eliza. This connection with Miss Rowan exemplifies the defendant's deteriorating judgment. A man of his position, his breeding, his responsibilities, choosing someone so wholly inappropriate demonstrates a clear break from rational thought. Eliza felt each word like a slap, but she kept her face neutral, her posture straight. Then it was Marcus's turn. Your Honor, we'd like to present evidence that the petitioner himself is the source of instability, not through illness, but through deliberate manipulation and criminal conduct. He opened the ledger. What followed was systematic destruction, document after document, showing bribes, forgeries, and fraud. Witnesses testifying to threats and coercion. The elder Duke's face went from confident to furious to something approaching fear. Finally, Marcus called Eliza to the stand. Miss Rowan, you've been characterized as evidence of the defendant's poor judgment. Do you have a response? Yes. She looked directly at the elder Duke. I'm evidence of his courage, his refusal to let power dictate love, his choice to be human instead of legacy. She turned to the magistrate. The petitioner wants you to believe that choosing me over strategic alliance is irrational, but perhaps the real irrationality is believing that people are assets to be managed instead of individuals with their own value. The courtroom was silent. Then the magistrate spoke. I've heard enough. This hearing is adjourned for deliberation. They waited in an anteroom. Lucien, Eliza, Marcus, Kate, all of them too tense to speak. An hour passed. Then 2. Finally, the magistrate returned. In the matter of Lucien Viremont's competency, I find the evidence of manipulation and criminal conduct by the petitioner to be overwhelming and disturbing. Furthermore, I find that the defendant has demonstrated sound judgment, financial acuity, and the strength of character to resist improper control. He looked directly at the elder Duke. Petition denied. All guardianship claims are dismissed. Additionally, I'm referring these documents to the criminal court for investigation of fraud. Lucien exhaled. Eliza felt tears burning her eyes. They'd won. But as they left the courtroom, the elder Duke blocked their path. His face was a mask of fury barely contained. This isn't finished, he said quietly. You've embarrassed me publicly, exposed me legally. But I still have power, boy, and I promise you, both of you, will pay for this humiliation. You have no power over me anymore, Lucien said. Don't I? The elder Duke's smile was poisonous. She has a family, a sister, parents who depend on social standing for survival. Think carefully about what you've just done. He walked away, leaving the threat hanging in the air like smoke. Eliza felt her victory curdle into something cold and frightening. Because the elder Duke was right, she had vulnerabilities he could exploit, people she loved who could be hurt. He's bluffing, Lucien said, but his voice lacked conviction. No, Eliza whispered. He's planning? The attack came 48 hours later, and it came from Mary Ann. Eliza was having tea with Kate when the message arrived. A note delivered by a street urchin, written in her mother's panicked handwriting. Come home immediately. Your sister's reputation is being destroyed. They ran. The Rowan house was in chaos when Eliza burst through the door. Her mother stood in the drawing room, ashen-faced, holding what looked like a pamphlet. Marianne sat on the sofa, crying silently, her perfect composure finally shattered. "What happened?" Eliza demanded. Catherine thrust the pamphlet at her. These, they're everywhere. Every corner, every shop, every gentleman's club in London." Eliza looked down. The paper was cheap, the printing crude, but the words were devastating. The truth about the Rowan sisters. How one family's ambition led to scandal and deception. Miss Marianne Rowan's secret life exposed. Below was a list of supposed indiscretions, meetings with married men, gambling debts, an alleged affair with a stable hand. All lies. All meticulously detailed enough to sound plausible. "None of this is true," Eliza said immediately. "Truth doesn't matter." Her mother's voice was hollow. "It's printed. It's public. 3 families have already withdrawn marriage proposals. Lady Pemberton sent a note saying Marianne is no longer welcome at her gatherings." Marianne looked up, her face blotchy and swollen. "They're destroying me because of you." The words hit like a physical blow. "Marianne, the elder Duke promised to ruin our family if you didn't back down. And you didn't. You kept fighting, kept pushing, and now I'm paying for your choices." Her voice cracked. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't challenge anyone. I just wanted a normal life, and now it's gone." "This isn't Eliza's fault," Kate said sharply. "This is the elder Duke's cruelty." "Which was aimed at Eliza but hit me instead." Marianne stood, her hands shaking. "Do you understand what this means? Every door that was open to me is now closed. Every prospect, every opportunity, every future I imagined, gone. Because my sister decided to fight a war she couldn't win." "We did win," Eliza said quietly. The hearing saved Lucian, it didn't save us." Marianne walked to the window, staring out at nothing. "I'm ruined, completely. And for what? So you could have your love story?" The silence was crushing. Finally, Catherine spoke. "The elder Duke sent another note, private, delivered directly to me." She pulled out a second paper, this one on expensive stationery. "He says he'll stop the attacks if you end your relationship with Lucian, publicly, definitively. He wants you to announce that it was all a mistake, that you were manipulated, that you're returning to your proper place. And if I do that, Marianne's reputation is restored. He promises to circulate a retraction, blame the rumors on malicious gossip, restore her standing." Her mother's eyes were desperate. "Eliza, please. I know you love him, but is it worth sacrificing your sister's entire future?" Eliza looked at Marianne's back, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs, looked at her mother's pleading expression, looked at Kate, who was watching her with something like pity. "I need to think," she said. "There's nothing to think about," Catherine snapped. "Your sister's life is being destroyed. You end this, or—" "I said I need to think." Eliza's voice came out harder than intended. "Give me until tonight." She left before her mother could argue, Kate following silently. They walked through London's streets, Eliza's mind spinning. "You can't give in," Kate said finally. "You know that, right? If you back down now, he wins. He learns that threatening your family is effective, and he'll use it forever. And if I don't back down, Marianne suffers. My parents suffer. Everyone I love pays the price for my stubbornness. It's not stubbornness. It's courage. Courage that costs other people everything." Eliza stopped walking, leaned against a building. "What kind of person am I if I let my sister be destroyed just so I can keep my happiness? What kind of person are you if you let a monster control your life through fear?" They stared at each other. "I don't know what to do," Eliza whispered. "Yes, you do." Kate squeezed her shoulder. "You just don't want to do it." Eliza found Lucian at Marcus's office, surrounded by legal documents, planning their next move against his father's criminal charges. When he saw her face, everything else stopped mattering. "What happened?" She told him everything, the pamphlets, Marianne's tears, the elder Duke's ultimatum. Watched his expression shift from concern to fury. "He's escalated," Marcus said grimly, "which means he's desperate. The criminal investigation is proceeding, his reputation is damaged, he's lashing out. At my family, at people who have nothing to do with this." Eliza's voice was steady, but inside she felt like she was breaking apart. "He wants me to end our relationship publicly. If I do, he stops the attacks." Lucian went very still. You're not seriously considering my sister is being destroyed because of me. Your sister is being destroyed because my father is a monster. He crossed to her, took her hands. If you give in now, Eliza, he'll know he can control you, control us, forever. Then what do I do? Let Marianne's life be ruined? Let my parents lose everything? Watch everyone I love suffer while I'm happy? You fight back. Marcus stood, started pulling documents from a filing cabinet. We've been playing defense, reacting to his attacks, trying to shield ourselves. But he's made a mistake with these pamphlets. What mistake? Libel is a crime. Printing false statements with intent to harm is prosecutable. Marcus spread papers across his desk. If we can prove he's behind the pamphlets, link them directly to him, we can file charges. He's too smart to leave evidence, Eliza said. Maybe, but he's also arrogant. He thinks he's untouchable. Marcus looked at her. Someone printed those pamphlets. Someone distributed them. Someone paid for all of it. Money leaves trails. How long would that take to investigate? Weeks? Maybe months? Marianne doesn't have weeks. Eliza pulled her hands from Lucian's, started pacing. By the time we prove anything, her reputation will be permanently destroyed. The damage will be done. So we stop playing his game, Lucian said suddenly. We changed the rules entirely. How? His eyes met hers and she saw the exact moment he made a decision. We get married. Tomorrow. Publicly. Before he can escalate further. The room went silent. That's insane, Marcus said. That's brilliant, Kate countered. She'd followed Eliza to the office, standing quietly in the corner. If they marry, Eliza becomes a duchess. Her family becomes connected to the Viramont name, the legitimate Viramont name, not the elder duke's damaged reputation. The social protection would be immediate. It would also make us a permanent target, Eliza said. We're already a target. Lucian stepped closer. But as my wife, you'd have legal protection, financial security, social standing he can't easily attack, and your family would be under that same umbrella. You're talking about marriage as a defensive strategy. I'm talking about marriage as a commitment I was going to propose anyway, just accelerated by circumstances. His voice softened. I love you. I want to marry you. The timing is terrible, but the decision isn't. Lucienne, if you need time to think, I understand. If you need reassurance, I'll provide it. But if you're hesitating because you think you're not worth fighting for, then you're wrong. He took her hands again. You're worth everything. Eliza felt tears burning. What if I can't do this? What if I'm not strong enough to be a duchess, to face society, to survive whatever he throws at us next? Then we'll fail together. He smiled slightly. But I don't think we will. You faced him in his own study. You found evidence he thought was hidden. You stood up in court and told the truth while everyone watched. You're the strongest person I know. I'm terrified. Good. So am I. He kissed her forehead gently. But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe alone. She looked at Marcus. Would this actually work, legally? It's risky. Marriage requires a license, witnesses, ceremony. Even rushing it would take days. He drummed his fingers on the desk, thinking. Unless we use a special license. Those can be obtained quickly if you have connections and money. I have both, Lucian said. Then yes. Theoretically, you could marry within 24 hours. Marcus met Eliza's eyes. But understand, this isn't a romantic elopement. This is a public declaration of war. The elder duke will be furious. He'll see it as the ultimate defiance. Let him, Lucian said. Eliza took a deep breath. Thought about Marianne crying, her mother's desperation, the elder duke's threat. Then she thought about Lucian's hand in hers, Kate's fierce loyalty, the moment in that courtroom when truth had actually won. All right, she said, let's do it. What followed was controlled chaos. Marcus began processing the special license, an expensive, complicated procedure that required calling in favors and bribing clerks. Kate ran to gather witnesses, and Lucienne took Eliza home to face her family. The conversation went about as well as expected. Married, Catherine looked like she might faint. Tomorrow? I know it's fast. Fast? It's insane. You've known him a month. You're not prepared. You haven't negotiated settlements or... Mother! Eliza's voice was firm. The elder Duke is destroying Marianne's reputation to punish me. If I marry Lucien, I gain the social protection to fight back, to protect all of us. Or you paint an even larger target on this family. The target's already there. At least this way we have shields. Eliza turned to Marianne, who'd been silent. I know you're angry. I know this isn't fair, but I'm trying to fix it. By marrying a duke. Marianne's voice was flat. How convenient. It's not convenient. It's strategic. And if it works, your reputation can be rebuilt. And if it doesn't, then we're no worse off than we are now. Marianne stared at her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she laughed, a bitter, exhausted sound. You've changed. What? A month ago, you would have apologized and disappeared. You would have sacrificed yourself to keep everyone else comfortable. She stood, walked over. Now you're plotting strategy and demanding we trust you. It's unsettling. Is that good or bad? I don't know yet. Marianne reached out, straightened Eliza's collar, a sisterly gesture that felt like forgiveness. But if you're going to marry a duke and wage war on his horrible father, at least let me help you not look like you're fleeing a disaster. I am fleeing a disaster. Then flee with style. She turned to their mother. Mother, we're going to need the good jewelry. All of it. Catherine looked between her daughters, something shifting in her expression. You're both mad. Probably, Marianne agreed. But Eliza's right about one thing. We can't keep letting him win by default. So if this is our battle, let's fight it properly. Their father, who'd been silent throughout, finally spoke. Will this work, Eliza? Truly? I don't know, Papa, but doing nothing hasn't worked. Maybe it's time to try something radical. He studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. Then you have my blessing, for what it's worth. It's worth everything, she said quietly. The wedding was scheduled for 11 o'clock the next morning at a small church Marcus knew. Sympathetic clergy, discreet location, far enough from fashionable London to avoid immediate attention. Eliza spent the night at Kate's house, unable to sleep, alternating between excitement and terror. You're making the right choice, Kate said, sitting with her at dawn. Am I? Or am I just making the choice that feels less wrong? Sometimes that's the same thing. Kate handed her tea. You love him. He loves you. Everything else is noise. Very loud, very dangerous noise. Still noise. Kate smiled. You're going to be a duchess by noon. How does that feel? Surreal, terrifying, wrong. Eliza set down her cup. I'm nobody. I'm not supposed to be a duchess. You're somebody who earned it. There's a difference. Society won't see it that way. Society is beginning to realize it doesn't have a choice. Kate's expression turned serious. You've already changed the narrative, Eliza. The trial showed people that the elder duke is vulnerable. Your relationship with Lucien proved that love can challenge power. Now you're claiming a position that was never meant for someone like you. That's revolutionary. Or delusional. History's full of revolutionaries who looked delusional until they won. Kate squeezed her hand. You're not alone in this. You have Lucien, me, Marcus, James, Simon, Amelia. We're all standing with you. Against one of the most powerful men in England, who's being investigated for fraud and losing public support daily. His power is eroding. Yours is building. She smiled. You just have to survive long enough to see it. The wedding was small, just Kate, Marcus, James, Simon, and Amelia as witnesses, plus Marianne and Eliza's parents. No flowers, no music, no ceremony beyond the bare legal minimum. Eliza wore a simple blue dress, her mother's pearls, and shoes that pinched. She felt like she was walking to her own execution. Lucien was waiting at the altar, looking calm in a way she definitely didn't feel. When she reached him, he leaned close and whispered, Still time to run. Don't tempt me. I'm serious. If you're not sure, I'm terrified. That's different than unsure. She met his eyes. I want this. I want you. I just wish the circumstances were less insane. Insanity seems to be our specialty. The ceremony took 9 minutes. The priest spoke about commitment and partnership, and Eliza barely heard any of it. She was too focused on Lucien's hand holding hers, steady and warm and real. Do you, Eliza Rowan, take this man? I do. Do you, Lucien Viremont, take this woman? I do. Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. That was it. No kiss, no celebration, no moment of romantic triumph, just legal words making everything permanent and irrevocable. Well, Marcus said as they signed the register, that's done. You're officially the Duchess of Viramont. Eliza looked at her new name on the paper and felt dizzy. What happens now? Now we make it public. Lucian turned to Marcus. Send the announcement to every major paper. I want it on front pages by tonight. That will cause chaos. That's the point. His expression hardened. My father wanted me to choose between love and legacy. I'm choosing both, publicly. Let him choke on it. The announcement hit London like an explosion. By evening, the news was everywhere. The Duke of Viramont had married Eliza Rowan in a private ceremony, making the overlooked wallflower one of the highest-ranking women in English society. Reactions were immediate and violent. Some families were outraged. Lady Pemberton reportedly threw a vase. Helena Crawford locked herself in her room. The elder Duke's associates sent furious letters demanding explanations. But others were intrigued. People are talking, Kate reported the next day, reading through correspondence. Some are scandalized, yes, but many are fascinated. They want to know who you are, how you managed it, what happens next. They want a spectacle. They want a story, and right now yours is the most interesting one in London. She looked up. The question is, what do we do with their attention? We use it, Lucien said. He'd been strategizing with Marcus all morning. My father's power comes from operating in shadows, private threats, behind-the-scenes manipulation. We bring everything into the light. How? Eliza asked. By being visible. By attending every social event, accepting every invitation, forcing society to acknowledge you as a duchess. By making it impossible for him to attack you without exposing himself. That's dangerous. Everything is dangerous right now. At least this way we control the narrative. So they went to war with visibility. The first event was Lady Morrison's evening salon, a gathering of influential women known for political discussions and social power. The invitation had arrived that morning, addressed to the Duchess of Viramont, written in careful script that suggested both curiosity and challenge. Eliza dressed carefully, a green gown that Kate had helped select, jewelry that proclaimed wealth without ostentation, hair styled to suggest confidence she didn't feel. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. You look like a duchess, Marianne said quietly. She'd come to help prepare, an olive branch extended carefully. I feel like I'm wearing a costume. That's because you are. We all are. Marianne adjusted the necklace slightly. The difference is, you might actually change what the costume means. The salon was exactly as intimidating as Eliza expected. 30 women seated in a perfectly arranged drawing room, all turning to stare as she was announced. Conversation stopped. Teacups paused mid-air. The attention was suffocating. Lady Morrison rose to greet her. Your Grace, how lovely of you to come. The title still sounded foreign. Thank you for inviting me. We were all so surprised by your marriage. Such a sudden development. Love rarely operates on society's schedule. A few women smiled at that. Others frowned. Tell me, Lady Morrison continued, leading her to a chair. What are your thoughts on the Marriage Reform Act currently in Parliament? It was a test. Eliza recognized it immediately. The same trap the elder Duke had tried to spring. They wanted to see if she had opinions or just borrowed her husband's. I think it's insufficient, she said clearly. Property rights are important, but they don't address the fundamental issue. Women are still treated as transactions rather than people. Reform needs to include legal protection against coerced marriages and independent access to divorce. The room went very quiet. That's a radical position, someone said. That's an honest position. Radical is just what we call ideas that challenge people who benefit from the current system. And you think you understand these systems? Another woman, older, skeptical. You've been a duchess for less than 2 days. I've been a woman my entire life. I understand what it means to be dismissed, controlled, and told my value is contingent on male approval. Eliza met her eyes. Being a duchess gives me a platform. It doesn't change what I've lived. But it does change your perspective, Lady Morrison said. You're no longer one of the powerless. You're one of us. Am I? Or am I someone you're trying to determine deserves to be one of you? Eliza set down her teacup. I didn't marry Lucien for social position. I married him because he treats me like an equal, because he values truth over performance. If that makes me unsuitable for this room, then I'd rather be unsuitable than dishonest." Silence. Then, unexpectedly, an older woman in the corner started laughing. "Well, she's certainly not boring." "Boring would be easier to dismiss," Lady Morrison said, but there was something like respect in her voice. "Very well, Your Grace. You've made your position clear. Let's see if you can defend it." What followed was 2 hours of intense discussion. Women challenging Eliza on politics, philosophy, social reform. She held her own, sometimes stumbling, sometimes brilliant, always honest. By the time the salon ended, her head ached and her nerves were shredded. But several women approached her afterward. "That was refreshing," one said. "We so rarely get honesty in these spaces." "You should join our charitable foundation," another suggested. "We need voices like yours." "Call on me next week," a third offered. "I'd like to discuss your ideas further." Walking out, Eliza felt something shift. Not acceptance exactly, but acknowledgement. The beginning of legitimacy. "How did it go?" Lucien asked when she returned home. Their home, a townhouse he'd purchased separate from his family estates, a space that was theirs alone. "I think I survived. Maybe even impressed a few people." She collapsed onto a sofa. "But it was exhausting. Performing confidence I don't feel, defending positions people want to tear apart, trying to prove I deserve a position I'm not sure I even want." He sat beside her, pulled her close. "You don't have to want it. You just have to use it." "For what?" "For changing things. For making the world slightly better than how we found it." He kissed her temple. "You're already doing it. Those women listened to you, actually listened. That's power. Power I have no idea how to wield. Then we'll learn together." The attacks continued, but something had changed. The Elder Duke's whisper campaign against Eliza lost effectiveness when she appeared publicly confident, articulate, legitimate. The pamphlets about Marianne were met with counter-narratives from families who'd attended the trial and seen the Elder Duke's corruption exposed. Society's opinion was shifting, not universally, not quickly, but measurably. 3 weeks after the wedding, the criminal investigation into the Elder Duke's fraud concluded. The findings were damning, evidence of bribery, forgery, and conspiracy. He was stripped of several honorary positions and placed under legal restrictions while charges were processed. "He's losing," Marcus reported at dinner. "Not everything, not yet, but his grip on power is weakening. People are questioning him, distancing themselves. Which makes him more dangerous," Kate added. "Cornered animals lash out." She was right. The final attack came at the Ashford Grand Ball, the same venue where Eliza had first met Lucien, now hosting the social event of the season. Invitations had been coveted, and Eliza's arrival as Duchess of Veermont was anticipated with a mixture of curiosity and hostility. She dressed carefully, a silver gown that caught light like armor, hair styled by Marianne herself, jewelry that marked her status unmistakably. Lucien beside her wore formal evening wear, his expression calm but his hand tight on hers. "Ready?" he asked. "No, but I'm going anyway." They entered together. The ballroom fell silent, hundreds of people turning to watch. Eliza felt every eye, every judgment, every question. This was her test. Succeed here, and she'd secured her place. Fail, and everything they'd built would crumble. Lord Ashford approached first, extending his hand formally. "Your Graces, welcome." "Thank you for having us," Lucien said. They moved through the crowd. Some people nodded coolly. Others smiled cautiously. A few turned away entirely. Eliza kept her spine straight, her expression pleasant, her panic buried deep. Then she saw him. The Elder Duke stood across the ballroom, surrounded by his remaining allies, watching her with undisguised hatred. He said something to the man beside him, and they both laughed, a sound designed to carry. "Ignore him," Lucien murmured. "I'm trying." But the Elder Duke wasn't finished. He moved through the crowd with deliberate purpose, heading directly toward them. People parted uncertainly, sensing confrontation. "Well," he said when he reached them, "the happy couple, how touching." "Father," Lucien's voice was ice, "shouldn't you be preparing your defense for trial? Shouldn't you be hiding your embarrassment of a marriage?" He looked at Eliza with contempt. "Tell me, Miss Rowan, oh, forgive me, Your Grace, How does it feel to know everyone in this room is wondering how you manipulated my son? Eliza felt heat rise in her face. The ballroom was watching, waiting. I didn't manipulate anyone, she said quietly. No? Then explain how a nobody with no prospects, no beauty, no value somehow convinced the Duke of Viramont to destroy his legacy. I think you're confusing me with yourself. The words were out before she could stop them. You're the one who tried to destroy Lucien's autonomy, his freedom, his happiness. I'm just the person who helped him escape your control. Gasps rippled through the watching crowd. The elder Duke's face went dark. You insolent! Careful. Lucien stepped forward. You're in a ballroom full of witnesses. Every word you say right now becomes public record. And given your current legal situation, I'd suggest choosing them carefully. You've chosen a side street tart over your own blood, the elder Duke hissed. You've embarrassed this family, damaged our reputation, allied with people who will drag us down. I've escaped a prison you built. Lucien's voice carried across the silent room. You claim I've destroyed our legacy? You're the one facing criminal charges. You forged documents, bribed officials, tried to have me declared incompetent to satisfy your ego. I didn't destroy our family's reputation. You did. I'm just the one who's rebuilding it. With her? The contempt in his voice was vicious. This desperate, grasping, stop. Eliza's voice cut through his words. She stepped forward, meeting his eyes directly. You can insult me all you want. You can question my worth, my intentions, my right to be here. But here's what you can't change. I am the Duchess of Viramont, legally, permanently. And every day you spend attacking me is another day society watches you attack a woman who's done nothing except love your son. She turned to address the watching crowd, her heart hammering. I know what you're all thinking, that I don't belong here, that I'm too common, too ordinary, too wrong for this world. Her voice shook but held. And maybe you're right. Maybe I don't fit the image of what a duchess should be. But I'm here anyway. Not because I manipulated or schemed, but because someone saw value in me that I didn't see in myself. Because love, real love, honest love, doesn't care about status or expectations or what society thinks is appropriate. She looked back at the elder Duke. You tried to destroy me to punish your son for choosing happiness over your control. You attacked my family, spread lies, attempted to ruin innocent people. And why? Because you can't stand that Lucien found something real, something you never had and never will, partnership built on truth instead of possession. The elder Duke's face was purple with rage. You have no right. I have every right. Eliza's voice was steel now. I earned this position by surviving your attacks, by standing up when you expected me to crumble, by refusing to let your cruelty define me. She turned back to the crowd. So judge me if you want, reject me if you must, but know that I'm not going anywhere, and neither is the truth about what this man has done. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Then, from the back of the ballroom, someone started clapping. Lady Morrison. Slowly, deliberately, with her eyes fixed on Eliza. Others joined. Kate, of course. Marcus, James, and Amelia. Then, surprisingly, Lord Ashford. Then more, a scattered applause that grew into something substantial. Not everyone, not even a majority, but enough. The elder Duke looked around at the fragmenting support, the crumbling consensus, and for the first time Eliza saw actual fear in his eyes. This isn't over, he said quietly. Yes, Lucien said. It is. The elder Duke turned and left, his remaining allies trailing uncertainly behind him. Eliza felt her knees go weak. Lucien caught her immediately, holding her steady. You were magnificent, he whispered. I was terrified. Same thing. Lady Morrison approached, her expression unreadable. That was quite a speech, Your Grace. I'm sorry if I caused a scene. Don't apologize. This ballroom needed honesty for once. She extended her hand formally. Welcome to society, Duchess. The real version, not the performance. It wasn't universal acceptance. Many people still frowned, still whispered, still judged. But as the evening continued, Eliza found herself surrounded by conversation, by questions, by people genuinely interested in who she was rather than what she represented. The tide was turning. Later, alone in their carriage heading home, Eliza finally let herself collapse. Did that actually just happen? You publicly confronted my father in front of London's elite and won, Lucian said. Yes, that happened. I think I'm going to be sick. Wait until we're home. Carriages are hard to clean. She laughed despite herself, a slightly hysterical sound. What happens now? Now you're a duchess who society can't easily dismiss. Now people have to acknowledge you've earned your place. He pulled her close. Now we move forward. Together? Always. Eliza rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the adrenaline finally drain away. The elder duke was diminished but not destroyed. Society was accepting her, but warily. The battles weren't finished, but for the first time since this had all begun, Eliza felt like she might actually survive them. More than survive, she might actually win. Winning, Eliza discovered, was more complicated than surviving. The weeks following the Ashford ball brought a strange new reality. Invitations flooded in, not all friendly, but constant. Society couldn't decide whether to embrace her or destroy her, so they settled for watching obsessively. Every appearance was scrutinized, every word analyzed, every choice dissected by people who'd never cared about her existence before. You're the most talked about woman in London, Kate said over breakfast at the townhouse. How does that feel? Exhausting. Eliza pushed food around her plate. I can't go anywhere without being stared at. Can't say anything without it becoming gossip. Can't even wear the wrong color dress without someone writing about it. Welcome to power, Kate smiled sympathetically. It's not always what people imagine. I didn't want power. I wanted Lucien. You got both. Now you figure out what to do with them. The elder duke had retreated after the ball, but his presence lingered like smoke. The criminal trial was scheduled for month's end, and everyone knew he'd use the time to rebuild alliances, manipulate narratives, prepare his defense. Marcus spent long days strategizing with prosecutors, ensuring the case was airtight. He's planning something, Marcus warned during one of their planning sessions. He's too quiet, too contained. Men like him don't surrender gracefully. What can he do? Lucien asked. His reputation is damaged. His legal situation is precarious. He has no leverage. He has decades of accumulated favors and buried secrets. Never underestimate what a desperate man with connections can accomplish. The answer came 2 weeks before the trial, delivered through an anonymous letter that arrived at the townhouse. Eliza opened it without thinking, just another piece of correspondence in the endless pile. Then she read the first line and felt the world tilt. Your husband's mother didn't die of natural causes. Ask him about the fall. Ask him what he saw. Her hand shook as she read it again, then a third time. Lucien found her in the study, still holding the paper, her face white. What happened? She handed him the letter wordlessly. He read it, and something terrible crossed his expression. Pain mixed with old rage, mixed with something that looked like guilt. Lucien? She fell down the stairs. His voice was flat, distant. When I was 14, they said it was an accident. But it wasn't? He was quiet for a long moment. Then, I don't know. I was there. I heard them arguing, my mother and father screaming at each other, then a crash. By the time I reached the hallway, she was at the bottom of the stairs, dead. Did your father push her? I don't know. I've never known. He set down the letter with shaking hands. He was standing at the top of the stairs. She was at the bottom. The doctor ruled it accidental. No investigation, no questions. Just a quick burial, and everyone moved on. Except you. Except me. He met her eyes, and she saw the 14-year-old boy who'd lost his mother and never gotten answers. I've lived with that uncertainty for 20 years, wondering if my father murdered her, wondering if I could have stopped it, wondering if my silence made me complicit. Eliza felt her chest constrict. Why is someone bringing this up now? Because my father wants to destroy me. What better way than to suggest I covered up a murder? That I've known the truth all along and said nothing? Lucian's jaw tightened. If this becomes public during the trial, it undermines everything, makes me look like I'm hiding crimes too. We need to tell Marcus. And say what? That 20 years ago my mother died under suspicious circumstances, and I have no proof of anything except my own doubt? He stood, started pacing. This is exactly what he wanted. to make me question myself, to make everyone question me. Then we investigate, properly, find out what actually happened. After 20 years, any evidence is long gone. Witnesses have died or been paid off. There's nothing to find. There's always something. Eliza stood too, grabbed his hands. Your father wouldn't be using this as a weapon if it couldn't hurt him too. Which means there's truth here he's afraid of. Or truth that destroys me. Then we find out which. She squeezed his hands. Together. They started with the staff who'd been at Veermont House 20 years ago. Most were gone, retired, dead, or dismissed. But Marcus tracked down 3 former servants willing to talk quietly, away from the Elder Duke's influence. The housekeeper remembered the night clearly. Terrible arguing, the Duchess screaming that she couldn't live this way anymore, the Duke shouting back. Then the crash. Did you see what happened? Eliza asked. No, miss. Your Grace, I was in the kitchen, but I heard the Duke call for help. His voice, it didn't sound surprised. It sounded satisfied. A footman recalled seeing bruises on the Duchess in the weeks before her death. She covered them, wore high collars, long sleeves, but we knew, everyone knew. Why didn't anyone report it? Report it to who? The magistrate was the Duke's friend. The doctor was on his payroll. Who would listen to servants over a Duke? The third witness was the physician who'd signed the death certificate, now elderly, living in retirement outside London. He agreed to meet them in a tea house, somewhere neutral and quiet. I've regretted that signature for 20 years, Dr. Thornton said without preamble. The Duchess's injuries weren't consistent with a simple fall. There were defensive wounds on her arms, signs of struggle. Why did you rule it accidental? Lucian's voice was strained. Because the Duke threatened to destroy me if I didn't. He had leverage, debts I'd accumulated, mistakes I'd made. He said he'd ruin my practice, my reputation, my family. The doctor's hands trembled around his teacup. I told myself it didn't matter. She was already dead. Justice wouldn't bring her back. But I was wrong. Justice always matters. Would you testify? Marcus asked. Officially? At my age, with nothing left to lose? Yes. Dr. Thornton met Lucian's eyes. Your mother deserved better than my cowardice. Let me try to correct that now. They brought everything to the prosecutors handling the fraud case. Witness statements, the doctor's testimony, circumstantial evidence that painted a picture of abuse and possible murder. It wasn't conclusive. It wouldn't result in murder charges after so long. But it was enough to reopen questions. Enough to add to the pattern of the Elder Duke's cruelty and corruption. This changes the trial, the lead prosecutor said. It shows a lifetime of violence and manipulation, not just financial crimes. It makes him sympathetic to no one. It also exposes my family, Lucian said. Makes our history public. Your father already made it public by threatening to use it. The prosecutor closed his file. The question is whether you want to control the narrative or let him do it. They released the information themselves, through carefully worded statements to reputable papers. The story broke 3 days before the trial. New evidence suggests Duchess's death. 20 years ago may not have been accidental. The reaction was volcanic. Society that had been gradually accepting Eliza now rallied around her and Lucian. The Elder Duke's remaining supporters evaporated overnight. Even families who'd defended him for decades began distancing themselves publicly. He's finished, Kate said, reading through the morning papers. No one will touch him now. He's still fighting, Marcus warned. Don't underestimate him until the verdict is read. The trial began on a cold morning in late November. The courtroom was packed. Society members, journalists, curious onlookers all crammed into every available space. Eliza sat in the gallery between Marianne and Kate, watching as the Elder Duke was led to the defendant's table. He looked older than she remembered, diminished. But when his eyes swept the room and landed on her, the hatred there was still incandescent. The prosecution presented their case methodically. Evidence of fraud, bribery, conspiracy, witnesses testifying to threats and coercion. The ledger entries Eliza had found, now validated by financial experts. Dr. Thornton's testimony about the Duchess's death, delivered in a quiet voice that nonetheless carried to every corner of the courtroom. Through it all, the Elder Duke sat motionless, his expression carved from stone. Then came his defense. His lawyers argued that the financial irregularities were administrative errors. that the witnesses were unreliable, motivated by revenge, that the questions about the Duchess's death were baseless speculation raised by a bitter son. The defendant is a pillar of society, his lead counsel argued, a man of honor and distinction being destroyed by false accusations from people seeking to profit from his downfall. The judge listened impassively. The jury looked skeptical, but uncertain. Then the prosecution called Lucien to testify. Eliza watched him take the stand, his face pale but composed. He swore his oath and sat, hands folded, meeting the prosecutor's eyes. "Your Grace, please describe your relationship with your father." "Complicated." Lucien's voice was steady. "He's always been controlling, demanding, violent when crossed." "Violent? Can you elaborate?" "He hit my mother, repeatedly. I witnessed it multiple times throughout my childhood, and when she finally tried to stand up to him, she died under suspicious circumstances that were never properly investigated." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" "Because I was 14, because he was powerful, because no one would have believed me." Lucien's jaw tightened. "And because I blame myself. For not protecting her, for not being brave enough to speak up." "What changed?" "I met someone who taught me that silence enables cruelty, that truth matters even when it's difficult, that the only way to stop monsters is to expose them." His eyes found Eliza in the gallery. "My wife showed me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it." Eliza felt tears burning. The defense attorney stood for cross-examination, aggressive and sneering. "Isn't it true, Your Grace, that you've been estranged from your father for years?" "Yes." "And isn't it true that you stand to inherit everything if he's convicted?" "Yes." "So you have a significant financial motive to see him destroyed." "I have a significant moral motive to see him held accountable." Lucien's voice hardened. "My inheritance means nothing if it's built on violence and lies." "You expect this jury to believe you're motivated purely by principle?" "I expect this jury to look at the evidence, the forged documents, the bribed officials, the witnesses he threatened, the pattern of abuse spanning decades." Lucien leaned forward. "My father taught me that power matters more than truth. My wife taught me he was wrong. I'm testifying because truth should matter more than power. That's principle." The cross-examination continued, trying to break him, but Lucien held firm. When he finally stepped down, exhausted but unbowed, Eliza saw the jury's expressions shift. Skepticism giving way to something else. Belief, maybe. Or at least consideration. The trial lasted 6 more days. Both sides presented closing arguments. The judge gave instructions. The jury deliberated for 14 hours. Eliza spent that time pacing their townhouse, unable to eat or sleep or think about anything except the verdict. Lucien was calmer, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands kept clenching. "What happens if they acquit him?" she asked. "Then we've exposed him publicly, but he escapes legal consequences. His reputation is still destroyed, but he remains free. And if they convict, then he faces prison, asset forfeiture, complete loss of status." Lucien met her eyes. "And we finally get to live without his shadow." The summons came at 4 o'clock the next afternoon. Verdict reached. All parties to return to court immediately. The courtroom was somehow more packed than before, people standing along the walls, pressing against the doors. Eliza took her seat, Marianne gripping her hand tightly. The jury filed in. 12 faces, carefully neutral, revealing nothing. The elder Duke stood, flanked by his lawyers. For the first time, Eliza saw actual fear in his expression. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" the judge asked. "We have, Your Honor." "On the charge of fraud, how do you find?" "Guilty." The courtroom erupted, shouts, gasps, pandemonium. The judge's gavel cracked repeatedly, demanding order. "On the charge of conspiracy?" "Guilty." "On the charge of bribery?" "Guilty." Each verdict landed like a hammer blow. The elder Duke's face went from white to gray to something that looked like death itself. When the noise finally settled, the judge spoke. "The defendant is hereby sentenced to 10 years imprisonment and total forfeiture of personal assets. All titles and privileges associated with criminal conduct are revoked pending further investigation." The elder Duke swayed. His lawyers caught him, held him upright. "Bailiff, take him into custody." As they led him away, the elder Duke's eyes found Lucien one last time. There was no hatred there anymore. just defeat. Complete and absolute. Eliza felt Lucien's hand find hers, squeezing tight. "It's over," he whispered. "Yes," she said. "It is." The aftermath was chaos. Journalists shouting questions, society members pressing close, suddenly eager to be associated with their victory. Marcus fighting through the crowd to reach them, his face split in a rare, genuine smile. "You did it," he said. "Against impossible odds, you actually did it." "We did it," Lucien corrected. "All of us." Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Not all supportive. There were angry faces mixed in, people who'd bet on the elder duke's power and lost. But there were others too. People cheering. Women especially, watching Eliza with something that looked like hope. A young girl pushed through the crowd, maybe 16, wearing a dress that had seen better days. She stopped in front of Eliza, nervous but determined. "Your Grace, I just wanted to say—" Her voice shook. "Thank you for standing up to him, for showing us it's possible." "What's your name?" Eliza asked gently. "Anne Winters. My father worked for the Duke. He was terrible to us. We couldn't fight back because we needed the job. But now," her eyes filled with tears, "now everyone knows what he really was, and we don't have to pretend anymore." Eliza took the girl's hands. "You were never alone in that. So many people suffered in silence, but silence is ending. Because of you. Because of all of us." Eliza squeezed her hands. "Remember that. We're stronger together than any of them are alone." The girl nodded, wiped her eyes, and disappeared back into the crowd. "That's going to keep happening," Kate observed. "You've become a symbol." "I didn't want to be a symbol. I just wanted justice." Sometimes they're the same thing. The celebration that night at their townhouse was subdued but genuine. Marcus, Kate, James, Simon, Amelia all gathered around the dining table, exhausted and relieved and slightly disbelieving. 10 years, Simon said, shaking his head. "I honestly didn't think they'd convict him." "They couldn't ignore the evidence," Marcus said, "and they couldn't ignore public opinion. The combination was lethal." "What happens now?" Marianne asked. She'd been quiet all evening, processing everything. "Now we rebuild," Lucien said. "The estate, the reputation, the family name. Make it mean something worth preserving." "And avoid becoming what he was," Eliza added. "That's the real challenge." James raised his glass. "To not becoming monsters when you defeat them." They drank to that. Later, alone in their bedroom, Eliza finally let herself collapse. The adrenaline that had sustained her through months of conflict drained away, leaving her hollow and shaking. "I can't believe it's actually over," she said. "It's not over. Not completely." Lucien sat beside her, pulled her close. "There will be appeals, lingering resentments, people who blame us for his downfall. But the immediate danger is gone." "Yes." He kissed her temple. "We can breathe now, actually live instead of just surviving." "I don't know how to do that. I've been fighting so long I've forgotten what normal feels like." "Then we'll learn together." He tilted her face toward his. "What do you want, Eliza? Actually want, not what you think you should want." She thought about it. "I want to help people. Like that girl today, Anne. I want to use this position to make things better for women who can't fight back themselves." "Then do it." "It won't be popular. Society already thinks I'm too radical. Society thought you were invisible 6 months ago. Look how wrong they were." He smiled. "You've already changed the rules. Might as well keep breaking them." The months that followed were strange and wonderful and difficult in equal measure. Eliza established a charitable foundation focused on women's legal protections and education. She gave talks, attended meetings, used her title to open doors previously closed. Not everyone approved. There were still whispers, still judgments, still people who thought a duchess shouldn't concern herself with such matters. But increasingly, people listened. She helped pass amendments to the Marriage Reform Act. She funded schools for girls from lower-class families. She created networks of support for women escaping abusive situations. Small victories, but real ones. Marianne found her own path, refusing marriage proposals until she found someone who valued her for more than her beauty. When she finally accepted a proposal, it was to a quiet scholar who made her laugh and challenged her to think. "He's not rich," Marianne told Eliza over tea. "Not titled, not impressive by society's standards. But you love him? Desperately. She smiled. You taught me that matters more. I didn't teach you anything. You taught me that settling for safety isn't the same as choosing happiness, that courage looks different than we're told, that being overlooked isn't the same as being worthless. Marianne's eyes were bright. You changed everything, Eliza, for all of us. 2 years after the trial, Eliza stood in the same ballroom where she'd once spilled champagne and wanted to disappear. This time, she was hosting a charity gala to benefit her foundation. The room was full, not just of aristocrats, but of women from all backgrounds, all classes, all circumstances. She stood at the front, preparing to speak, and saw in the crowd faces she recognized. Kate, of course. Marcus. Her parents, looking proud and slightly overwhelmed. Marianne with her scholar husband. Dr. Thornton, who'd found peace in his final years by telling the truth. Anne Winters, now 18 and attending university on a scholarship from Eliza's foundation. And Lucien, standing at the back, watching her with the same expression he'd worn the night he'd asked her to dance, like she was something rare and precious and real. Thank you all for coming, Eliza began, her voice steady. 2 years ago, I stood in this room as a nobody, overlooked, dismissed, convinced my value was contingent on staying invisible. She paused, meeting eyes around the room. But someone saw me anyway. Someone believed I was worth fighting for. And that changed everything, not just for me, but for everyone who's ever felt invisible, powerless, voiceless. Her speech continued, outlining the foundation's work, celebrating the women who'd found courage to leave dangerous situations, announcing new programs to expand access to legal representation. But what mattered most wasn't the words. It was the faces listening, the women who saw themselves in her story, the young girls who realized invisibility wasn't permanent, the men who began questioning whether power should come from control or from lifting others up. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. Afterward, as the event wound down and people filtered out, Eliza found herself alone in the garden, the same place where she and Lucien had stood after confronting Helena, where they'd decided to fight instead of flee. You were brilliant tonight, Lucien said, appearing beside her. I was terrified. Still, after everything, always. She leaned against him. But you taught me fear and courage aren't opposites. They're companions. Actually, you taught me that. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the last guest depart. Do you regret it? Lucien asked finally. The cost of all this? The battles, the exposure, the constant scrutiny? Eliza thought about the girl who'd stood against the wall at a ball, trying desperately to disappear. About the woman who'd confronted a duke in his own study, about the duchess who now stood in gardens planning revolutions disguised as charity. No, she said, I don't regret becoming visible. Even though it's harder, especially because it's harder, easy things don't change anything. She turned to face him. You asked me once what I wanted. I said I wanted to matter, not because of who I married or how I looked or which family I belonged to. I wanted to matter because of who I am. And do you? I'm beginning to think I might. She smiled. Turns out being overlooked was just preparation for being impossible to ignore. He laughed, kissed her gently. The world has no idea what it's in for. Good. Let's keep it that way. 3 years later, Eliza stood in a nursery, holding her daughter, a tiny, furious creature with Lucien's gray eyes and lungs that could wake the dead. She's got your determination, Lucien observed, watching the baby refuse to sleep. She's got your stubbornness, Eliza countered. Poor child, she's doomed. But as Eliza looked at her daughter, she didn't see doom. She saw possibility. A girl who would grow up knowing she mattered, who would never have to make herself invisible to feel safe, who would inherit a world slightly better than the one Eliza had fought through. What should we name her? Lucien asked. Eliza thought about the women who'd helped her. Kate's fierce loyalty, Marianne's eventual support, her mother's complicated love. Thought about the girl she'd been and the woman she'd become. Catherine, she said, after your mother, so she knows where courage comes from. She'll have to live up to quite a legacy. She will. Eliza kissed her daughter's forehead. Because we'll make sure she knows. Being overlooked was never about worth. It was about other people's failure to see. And once you're seen, once you choose to be seen, everything changes. Years passed. Catherine grew into a brilliant, willful girl who challenged every expectation placed on her. A second child came, a boy who was gentle and thoughtful and completely unlike his grandfather. The foundation expanded, influencing laws, changing lives, creating networks of support that reached far beyond London. The elder Duke died in prison, unmourned and largely forgotten. His estate was dissolved, his legacy reduced to a cautionary tale about the cost of cruelty. And Eliza? She became something she'd never imagined possible. A duchess who mattered not because of her title, but because of what she'd done with it. She wasn't perfect. She still felt uncertain sometimes, still questioned her decisions, still had days when imposter syndrome whispered that she didn't belong. But she'd learned that belonging wasn't something granted by others. It was something claimed by yourself. On a crisp autumn afternoon, 30 years after that first disastrous ball, an older Eliza returned to Lady Morrison's salon. She was 60 now, her hair silver, her face lined with years of worry and laughter and hard-won victories. The salon had changed. Younger women now, more diverse, more willing to speak uncomfortable truths. But the fundamental purpose remained: powerful women gathering to shape the world. Eliza took her seat, accepted tea, and listened to the conversation swirl around her. Then she noticed a young woman sitting alone near the window, quiet, watchful, trying to blend into the wallpaper. Eliza recognized that posture, that careful invisibility, that desperate hope that no one would notice her. She'd been that girl once. "Excuse me," Eliza said, standing. She crossed to the window, sat beside the young woman. "I'm Eliza Viermont. What's your name?" The girl looked up, startled. "Margaret? Margaret Fletcher." "First time at the salon, Margaret?" "Yes, Your Grace. My aunt brought me. She hoped—" The girl faltered. "I don't really belong here." "Why do you say that?" "I'm no one. Just a daughter from a minor family. I don't have connections or prospects or anything that would make me interesting to people like you." Eliza smiled, seeing herself across 3 decades. "Can I tell you something, Margaret?" "Of course. 30 years ago, I stood at a ball, invisible and overlooked, convinced I would never matter. Then someone saw me anyway. Someone believed I had value even when I didn't believe it myself." She took the girl's hand gently. "You're not no one. You're someone who hasn't been seen yet. There's a difference." "But I don't know how to—" Margaret's voice cracked. "How to be visible without being destroyed." "You start small. You speak one truth. You take one risk. You survive one challenge." Eliza squeezed her hand. "And then you do it again and again. Until one day you realize invisibility was never about you. It was about other people's failure to look." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "What if I'm not brave enough?" "Courage isn't something you have, it's something you practice." Eliza stood, held out her hand. "Come, let me introduce you to some people. Let me show you what's possible when you choose to be seen." Margaret took her hand, stood uncertainly. "Why are you helping me?" "Because someone helped me once, and the only way to honor that gift is to pass it forward." Eliza smiled. "Besides, the world needs your voice. It would be a shame if you spent your life trying to hide it." They walked together into the center of the salon, into conversations and connections and possibilities. And as Eliza watched Margaret begin to speak, hesitant at first, then stronger, she thought about the girl she'd been, the one who'd spilled champagne and wanted to disappear, the one who'd taken a dangerous hand from a dangerous man, the one who'd fought battles she wasn't supposed to win. That girl was gone now, transformed into someone else entirely. Someone who'd learned that power wasn't about domination. It was about lifting others up. That courage wasn't fearlessness. It was acting despite fear. That mattering wasn't about being perfect. It was about being present. Across the room, Lady Morrison caught her eye and smiled, a gesture of respect between equals. Eliza smiled back, thinking, "This is what victory looks like. Not a single moment of triumph, but years of small battles won. Not perfection achieved, but systems slowly changed. Not one woman saved, but generations taught they don't need saving. They need support, opportunity, and the courage to fight for themselves." She'd been invisible once. Now she made sure others didn't have to be. And in the end, that mattered more than any title, any marriage, any single victory could ever have meant alone. The woman who'd been nothing became everything by teaching others they'd never been nothing at all. That was legacy. That was power. That was enough.